2010, or the Revised Manual of Regulations for Private Schools in Basic Education, the establishment is done through legislation as subject to the condition that the school is established for foreign diplomatic personnel and their dependents and for other foreign temporary residents, similar to what is allowed in Singapore. In terms of the student body, it shall comprise no more than 33% as set by DepEd. Next slide. And then for school administration, it actually allows control and administration of aliens who have the necessary visa from the Bureau of Immigration and DOLE, which is distinct when it comes to higher ed. To the point of Senator Angara, we'll go to the next slide, focusing on higher education. Again, in higher education, the maximum ownership in the Philippines based on the Constitution, next slide please, is 40%. However, in Malaysia, Singapore, and Thailand, again, it is only indicated or provided via legislation, and 100% is actually allowed. You will see here that for the Philippines, the maximum that we could do because of the Transnational Higher Education Act is maximum is joint venture, whereas in other countries in ASEAN, it allows for sole ventures. Sample incentives include 100% tax exemption on statutory income and 200% tax deduction on investments for a maximum of 10 years. This has allowed them to actually attract 17 offshore campuses to set up in Malaysia, most of which are Australian and UK universities. In Singapore, there are 19 offshore campuses, again, mostly UK and Australian institutions. Whereas for Thailand, there are exemptions to foreign land ownership, and however, they keep that 50% of the council must be composed of Thai nationals. Next slide. But very recently, through the Transnational Higher Education Act, we've actually opened, permitted, and supported different types of internationalization activities, among them student, faculty, and researcher mobility, program mobility, such as twinning arrangements and joint programs. And there are various initiatives of this in the Commission on Higher Education between UK universities and among our best Philippine universities, particularly at the graduate level. And then there's institutional mobility. However, offshore campuses, to my knowledge, wala pa po tayong ganitong karanasan masyado. Next slide. In the MORFE, or the Manual of Regulations of Private Higher Education of 2008, it says there explicitly that foreign institutions may operate any degree program directly or indirectly in the Philippines, but no higher education shall be established exclusively for aliens, and no group of aliens shall comprise more than 1/3 of the enrollment. It also says that whatever is in the MORFE that is applied to private higher education institutions shall be applied also to foreign higher education institutions. Next slide. Our legal unit, led by Attorney Estrada, collated some of the possible challenges when it comes to regulatory restrictions that might be imposed on foreign institutions. So hypothetically, if an institution like Harvard comes to the Philippines, we will need to discuss issues such as governance, operations, and curriculum. For governance, control and administration of HEIs shall be vested in Filipino citizens. In terms of operations, it requires ownership of school sites and buildings. CHED also has strict policies when it comes to setting of tuition fees using regional deflators. So will that be applicable also to foreign institutions that come here, and using what standards? Also in terms of school calendar. We also, of course, know, based on our consultations with private institutions, that there are challenges when it comes to adherence to CHED PSGs. For example, if they come here and they want to teach teacher education, will they be required to follow CHED's curriculum on teacher education, which is now used across all higher education institutions, which also explicitly details curriculum, GE courses, classrooms, and laboratory facility requirements, even books and number of books. So textbooks are also preferably written by Filipino authors, etc. So these are things to consider. Next slide is comparative analysis of hiring of foreign faculty, something that we know has been an issue and is difficult, particularly in higher education. For both sectors, there is a grant of an alien employment permit and 9G visa. For basic education, we require them to pass the LET, consistent with RA 7836 of 1994, and must be from a country that permits Filipinos to teach. For higher education, holder of at least a master's degree and holder of an appropriate professional license. So this might pose difficulties. For example, I know of many individuals who finish their bachelor's degrees in the US and in the UK. When they come here, they cannot actually immediately take the PRC because they will need to account for some credits that are missing. So they will need to still enroll in a local institution despite finishing in a reputable foreign university because of this restriction. So this might be prohibitive. Also, we know from experience of other state universities that they cannot even hire dual citizens in our SUCs to allow them to teach. And this is really contrary to the direction of many countries in terms of aiming to attract the best to come to their countries to teach, to do research, to collaborate. And so these are things that might be open for discussion. Next slide. We know from the experience of many countries that internationalization is a tool, but the target and the vision for the education system must be clear and must be articulated so that we can connect this tool to whatever we want to achieve. If it's improving research productivity, if it's improving our standing in international rankings, if it is to increase competition in higher education, or to attract provision of graduate education for areas that we don't have capacity for, that needs to be clear and that needs to be the anchor by which we will then proceed. Allowing foreign ownership is also just a first step. Even in Singapore and Malaysia, they rolled out very generous government incentives and adjusted their policies to actually attract the best institutions to come. And so this will require other legislation to be able to do this. There's also a need to strengthen the capacity of DepEd, and TESDA to regulate the possible entry of poor quality institutions. And also, as we've seen in the examples in ASEAN, research is actually fueled by industry that is able to use the research. So as an ecosystem, you cannot have a well-performing institution doing research and it will not be sustained if there's no industry that uses that research and partners with the university. So we need to create that ecosystem for this to actually work. And so allowing foreign ownership is a first step. We also need to maybe make use of this opportunity to review government regulations in a way that enables quality institutions to thrive. So challenges of overregulation and complementarity might be two things that we can also have as we proceed in our discussion on internationalization specific to higher education. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Very good presentation. Thank you. Yeah. President of the United Tibet of the Philippines, Incorporated and Technical Education Skills Development Authority Representative, Father Onofre Inocencio. Good morning, Father. Are you ready to give your position, sir? Father, go ahead. Sir.
The interface of Tibet with higher education. And this is a kind of reflection that we had from series of summit that we had. And therefore it offers another perspective by which we will consider the bill from this aspect. The interface of Tibet program with higher education. And therefore we're addressing tertiary education, not only higher education. Because in the mandate of the different sectors, there is a distinction between lower tertiary education and higher education. And this is a point that we need to consider when we try to consider this bill. No? Because there is not clear distinction anymore from the program of Tibet program interface with higher education. And therefore, this is what I can bring to the discussion for.
That's a good point. We're really talking, we should include Tibet education here because the previous discussion was on public utilities and we talked about the Public Service Act amendments where we are liberalizing certain industries. And definitely those industries will need skilled personnel. I think that's where Tibet comes in. Yung binanggit ni KM na ecosystem, you need to feed into that ecosystem. Otherwise, they might go elsewhere. So next is UP President, Attorney Angelo Gigi Jimenez, sir. Morning.
Morning, everyone. My colleagues from the projectors, our honorable senators, thank you for the invitation. I would just like to start with an opening statement coming from the first UP president, a Protestant pastor named Murray Bartlett. He said that the University of the Philippines can serve the world best if it serves best the Filipino. Today, University of the Philippines is mandated not only to be the national university, but to aspire and to work to become a regional and global university. This particular provision, more than 10 years ago, is becoming more relevant today because this is now a globalized world. Some people call it omniversity now, not just university. In the 1960s, they invented the term multiversity. Today, it's omniversity, or what's the name of Facebook? Meta University, because we are all global. Let me just state that the University of the Philippines, in furtherance to its mandate to become a global university, has over 400 partnerships in 47 countries all over the world, most of them in Asia, even in Africa, where you would expect people. I mean, we have 5 partnerships in Africa as well, but I'm just mentioning that because it's the lowest that we are exposed to. And one of the most perhaps notable aspect is that we even host the International Rice Research Institute, and we are going to really appreciate because it's about expiring now. And this has provided so many of the advanced researches and made it accessible to our rice scientists at UP Los Baños. The other thing is that even the University of Nagoya has a satellite campus in the University of the Philippines, and the University of Nagoya has produced 6 Nobel Prize winners. And just last month, I went to the Universidad de Malaga in Andalusia to open up a office of the University of the Philippines there. I intend to share it with the rest of the educational institutions in the Philippines as our listening post for many of the opportunities for higher education, including funding, especially the Erasmus funding. We opened it last month. So for us, this is our trust. And let me go down to the basic particular proposal that was provided to us. Instinctively, I had to think like a lawyer, but and I asked the college to make me this particular little bit of a briefing on the issue. But again, to preface the second part of my statement is that we believe that the issue today of foreign ownership is a matter not of constitution or law, but basically a matter of policy. Our position is that the wording of the Constitution provides for an expansive enough zone of construction that we might not need to actually even touch its provision as it stands today. However, it may be clarified. Let me just point out that in your aforementioned quotation of Commissioner Gascon in the 1987 records of the Constitutional Convention, even in basic education, they were not talking of disallowing foreign ownership. They were debating about the level of foreign ownership. So there is no statement in the Constitution that abhors foreign participation in the educational system. It is our position, Your Honors, that the more important question is, what do we need from them, or what kind of foreign equity? The 60-40 didn't come from the Constitution as far as higher education. It came from the 12 regular foreign investment negative list. On the higher education, transnational higher education law, there is a clarification that foreign teachers are not public officers. This could pave the way for hiring of foreign professors in our country, and especially in government schools, because they cannot get tenure as of now. Also, there is a clarification in the THEA, the Higher Transnational Higher Education Act, that control and supervision is vested in boards. And so this could still support the idea that even in tertiary education, that the most important thing is that there is still Filipino control. I think we have not given up on that, and I agree with Senator Angara that concerning the basic education, the idea of control is a little more sensitive than in higher education. Let me just end this by saying that talent today knows no nationality. Many countries are recruiting the best talents all over the world to further their own national interest, no nationality. Let me just also tell you a development in the foreign field of education that is directly related to university in the Philippines. Today, I am getting a lot of suggestions and even invitations from foreign schools who have mature technology that they felt that we might be interested, particularly in science and technology, because many schools in the West and in the advanced countries in Asia, and I particularly had this conversation in Taiwan just recently, they no longer have students for their graduate schools. And they wanted us school, they have over capacity in mature areas that we might be interested in. I'm very interested, for example, in microchip productions at the National Kaohsiung.
Which institution?
National Kaohsiung.
Kaohsiung, Taiwan.
Yes, that just a specific example. We have a youth bulge. We are now in a limited demographic sweet spot. The world is aging, and the University of the Philippines is looking forward to fill in and increase our engagement with the rest of the world. I would stop here, Your Honors. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, President Gigil, and thank you for kind of disassembling or the different elements involved in foreign ownership, faculty, governance, etc. It's very useful. Thank you. Now we'll hear from former UP VP, former CHED Commissioner, Dr. Bautista. Cynthia, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning to the senators. So maybe we have an EDCOM 2 Standing Committee on Higher Education with 2 subcommittees, Teacher Ed and Higher Ed, and it has not yet really discussed this matter. But there are 2 priority areas in our Higher Ed subcommittee, which are internationalization and research and innovation. For research and innovation, our subcommittee on higher education is partnering with the National Academy of Science and Technology, which already has a lot of proposals that should really go into become policy. The sectoral members of the National Innovation Commission for the science community and for academe, and the National Research Council of the Philippines. So I'm happy that we have representatives here from NAST, Dr. Padolina and Dr. Concepcion for the NIC, so they may be able to give their preliminary positions. But my comments focus on observations regarding the entry of foreign higher education institutions in ASEAN because of their implications for the Senate deliberations. By the 1990s and 2000s, Malaysia and Singapore were the 2 ASEAN countries that purposely and strategically envisioned themselves as international education hubs. Malaysia as a knowledge economy and hub for international students in the Muslim world, resolutely pursuing the restructuring of its economy as a knowledge-based economy that captures higher value-added sectors. Singapore's strategy evolved over the years in terms of foreign institutions. A cursory look at the list of its 19 offshore campuses, which E.D. Carol Mark mentioned earlier, suggests different arrangements. So they're not all ownership, not all of them are concerned about ownership issues. But the common thread being the response of these HEIs to Singapore's strategic needs. So I guess, for instance, Singapore invited is the operative word, invited the Technical University of Munich to set up in Singapore as a hub for engineering programs like aerospace and as an institution to establish joint programs with NUS, like NUS TAMS in Architecture Program, the Nanyang Technological University TAMS Master of Science in Integrated Circuitry, or MS in Green Electronics. The National University of Singapore invited Duke University for its medical programs so that they could develop its medical program, and later invited Yale University to establish a liberal arts college since the British education system actually did not have the equivalent of the American GE. They just go directly to their specializations. In both instances, NUS and Singapore's Ministry of Education covered the costs of the establishment, supported it fully. So it's not like they're coming in and bringing in their capital. Some offshore campuses in Singapore are lodged in public partner institutions. So it's also subsidized by government. Government puts up the buildings in the university. For instance, they have the Culinary Institute of America in Temasek Polytechnic, Duke, and Yale in NUS. Some, like the Australian universities, are really part of their free trade zone agreements, so that the top university will come in. But one thing is clear, for both Malaysia and Singapore, the choice of HI is to partner with is selective, targeting top institutions that would help them. In the case of Malaysia, it's really to help them also project the reputation of Malaysia because they were going to attract foreigners. But for Singapore, to help them actually with their strategic interests. It is notable that in the case of Singapore, one study suggests that many of the offshore campuses established around the 2000s were set up with very limited time frames. So that includes Yale, having recently been announced to be terminated, for instance, their Yale relationship. And then, accordingly, the country has more strongly regulated, they have strongly regulated their foreign providers' access to higher education in the last few years, because they're now sure about what it is that they want from their higher education institutions. So selectivity in terms of strategic contribution to the country's socioeconomic goals and high reputation to further enhance the perception and reality of quality HEIs are operative words. As ASEAN's de facto education hubs at this juncture, top foreign universities are attracted to establish offshore campuses in Malaysia and Singapore because of a favorable education and business environment, like incentives, the ease of doing business, and the existence of a Singaporean and ASEAN market for students. So I guess the Philippines at present is not similarly situated, with a limited number of HEIs recognized by other countries to be of quality and insignificant, and I think other countries like Australia would say they only recognize this number of schools from the Philippines.
With your permission, Dr. Sis, I just want to recognize Committee Vice Chair Senator Bato de la Rosa. Morning, sir.
Yes, sir.
Pasensya na po.
Okay lang po, sir. So we're not in that position at the moment. We have an insignificant market of Filipino upper middle to upper class Filipinos. We have challenges in the ease of doing business and addressing corruption. For instance, for those who will be constructing buildings, procurement issues, etc. The small number of foreign students, and not because of the 30% cap, we really have a small number of foreign students coming here.
What's the 30% cap again? Could you refresh us?
So the maximum number of foreign students that you can take in. Regardless of that, we really have a few of them. The seeming reluctance of the Philippine government to invest in strategic partnerships, and nuanced policies like the prohibition on hiring dual citizens that ED Mark mentioned earlier, are in disincentives for reputable universities. So it's against this backdrop, Mr. Chair, joint ventures, partnerships in the form of dual degrees, research and innovation programs have been attractive to reputable institutions. I think the President Gigi already mentioned some of our dual degree programs. There are different universities with partnerships with reputable British universities. The closest we ever had to government investment in a partnership with a top university system that cited the NUS-Duke partnership in its justification is the PICARI, the Philippine California Advanced Research Institute, which faced numerous challenges from beginning to end. So I think Dr. Padrino...
We finished the cycle of PICARI because I remember there were... when the turnover to the new administration, the previous administration, there was some resistance to it. So I don't remember kung natuloy ba yun.
They finished.
There was 3 cycles. There were supposed to be 3 cycles.
So I think they finished the cycles, but they're calling it by another name now. It's called Lakas. Okay, so we have to learn from this. And if you have to open up to foreign HEI, we are open to foreign HEIs. If you have to open to outsource they must be addressing clear strategic goals. It's like it's like Singapore needed engineering, needed to beef up its engineering, so they invited, I guess, that might be by invitation. To my mind, what we must guard against is opening up to lower tier HEIs, which is a possibility because we are not a market for the higher tier yet. Or we will not, we're not a market for them. So the ones who will come are those who will be of lower quality. So we have to actually protect, guard against that, which will further erode the reputation of the
You're
Philippines.
saying it should be a race to the top, not a race to the
Yeah,
bottom. huh?
because our reputation is not as good as we imagined in the 1970s. Our reputation for diploma mills is very high, and we do not want to erode that. So while safeguards may be put in place through legislation and executive orders, I guess we also have to be careful, to be mindful of our implementation track record, a culture tolerant of circumventions of regulations, lack of capacity of regulatory bodies to regulate substandard HEIs, even among the Philippine HEIs. There among the considerations, also the positive or adverse impact on the private education crisis must also be part of the considerations. Thank you.
Thank you. Could you share maybe because it's Ma'am Tati's also here. You were in the commission together when you started the PICARI. What are the learnings from that, pros and cons? You mentioned it should be more targeted,
So maybe,
but wasn't that already targeted towards science, STEM, and research and innovation?
Mr. Chair, if I may be allowed to share, because I was,
Of course, sir. Yeah, Dr. Padulino, please go ahead.
and the honorable senators, PICARI was a novel attempt to try to get some kind of shot in the arm with our R&D programs in the Philippine higher education institutions. It was focused on two areas: the health innovation and translational medicine, and information infrastructure. And through the good connections of Mr. Dado Banatao, we were able to connect with University of California, Berkeley, a very highly ranked institution. We did learn a lot of lessons. The first one was really on the matter of negotiating and dealing with American universities. And if we want to deal with other universities in other parts of the world, we will also have to learn their administrative cultures. But we also found some practices that we would probably be able to adapt in order to enhance our research environment. But of course, our relationships with them were very much affected by the pace that we could adapt, because they work faster because their system is more mature, and so there were some delays. I could not attribute all of them to procurement, but there were some institutional policies, internal, that needed to be tweaked in order to keep pace with the kind of activity that we had at the other side of the Pacific. So those are the two major lessons, I think, Mr. Chair, that I could share for now with regard to PICARI. There are more, of course, but for now, I would end there. Thank you.
Thank you. But just to put it on the table, you can answer it now or later, Your Honors. But really, we're concerned with the larger goals of the program and how successful were we in achieving these, meaning technology transfer, maybe creating new industries or helping existing industries move further along in terms of value adding, among others, things like that. Because the conversation about an ecosystem basically, and the complaint is we produce a lot of graduates, but there's no ecosystem for these graduates to thrive in or to work in. So I think that's the context behind the PICARI, and we want to assess it that way, and these constitutional amendments in that sense, because we do, the president will probably sign the Tatak Pinoy law in a few days, and that's an attempt at industrial policy, and that's because we precisely that wants to address the lack of ecosystems in various industries. So the scientists, the more advanced medical professionals, etc., may have a place at home to work in. So, yeah. Dr. Licuana, do you want to chime in here at any point? Nice to see you again. Yeah.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Your Honors. Yeah, I was just whispering to Dr. Bautista if it would be okay to say this, that basically, well, since I'm retired and
I was about to say you're no longer in government, so I think it's okay
I
to
think
say.
I'm safe,
to say
yes,
anything,
exactly. I think part of our problem with PICARI is that we met resistance every step of the way. We weren't even facing our international counterparts yet. But here, and right here in these hallowed halls of the Senate, there were so many skeptics that were saying, what, can you eat research? What's it for? So basically, we have to look at that too. The ecosystem requires also support from the very top, the policymakers, and that was not enthusiastic, I must say. Sorry, thank you.
I remember that. I remember that because the budget debate was torturous. There were some years where I sponsored that budget, the higher education. I was still a vice chair and not yet the chairperson, so I remember that very well. And of course, some things were lost when the change of leadership. So, but yeah, if you could submit something, it's really our first attempt. In a way, it was paradigm breaking or shifting because we wanted to move out of our comfort zone and attempt something new. And of course, there will be resistance anytime you do something like that. So, yeah, maybe we can talk about that in detail, greater detail in another time. But it's good to learn from it. Can we hear from our friends from abroad? We have Dr. Gail McDonald, the senior consultant, because I understand they have an afternoon launching there. Dr. Gail McDonald is a senior consultant at the Arizona State University and former president of RMIT University in Vietnam, along with Dr. Minu Ipe. Yes, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Senator Ngara. Can I say that it's a real honor to be here, and I applaud each and every one of you in this room who clearly have a passion for education as a public good and as a mechanism of both economic and social development. So your considerations here are quite genuine and are clearly aimed at strengthening the capacity within the Philippines. I would like to speak in a personal capacity as a former president of RMIT Vietnam. So that's a university that has been operating in Vietnam for over 20 years. And as you saw, the Vietnamese government has been open to bringing in foreign universities, although they have restricted. They've been quite selective, and particularly in regards to putting barriers to entry in the form of the financial investment, the level of financial investment that these universities need to bring with them as they come into the country. So I would like to just mention some of the advantages and disadvantages that you might be deliberating on in regards to bringing in foreign universities and entering into the Philippine higher education and tertiary environment. So the first one is clearly the benefits are around knowledge and tech transfer, because you can provide very diverse educational offerings, programs that might not be available locally. And that obviously gives the opportunity of building local capacity and in both students and also in staff. And that was the situation that we experienced when we introduced mechatronics and robotics. So that was relatively new to Vietnam, and I believe more recently in the area of aviation. The second is in regard to quality education. If you are selective in who you bring in, and these organizations have got rankings, for example, in the Times Higher Ed, they've got established research cultures, you can actually bring in a lot of knowledge and expertise in regard to quality and quality frameworks. So they come with those already well established in their ecosystem of their own university and are often willing to share those experiences and those standards. I personally have also been asked to contribute to legislative changes within Vietnam. So I was asked my opinion on various components of new decrees. For example, they were looking at what should be the percentage of staff in higher education that had PhDs. And I was able to provide benchmarking, international benchmarking, accommodation for the local environment, and give some recommendations that then got built into the legislative structure. So as a foreign university, I was asked and willingly contributed to those sort of legislative changes that were occurring. Another advantage is obviously the internationalization, which is clearly an initiative within the Philippines at the moment. So it does open up a two-way corridor between universities and their networks outside of the Philippines, and then opening up to opportunities within the Philippines. So there's a cultural exchange, there's a global learning environment that becomes established. Another advantage is clearly the economic impact. When you establish a new university, you establish jobs, you attract students, you contribute to the local economy, you pay taxes, unless you get some tax incentives, which would always be quite favorable. And you can also encourage innovation and entrepreneurship. So there is an economic multiplier that clearly is in existence when you bring in a foreign university. There's also greater opportunity of employability because what you often have is students doing what's called a 2+1. They will actually spend 2 years in the foreign location, but their last year at their choice, they have the opportunity to go to the mothership or the mother country, and there they are able to get more international experience, and they're often, if they're, for example, in Australia, they're able to also get work experience. So there is an opportunity of increasing their employability. And you've also got networks that extend out into the industry partners. So for those universities that come into a new environment, they bring with them their own industry partnerships, which are already well established. Now, I should mention the disadvantages. In all honesty, there are some disadvantages. One is that you often get brain drain, as students that go overseas don't necessarily come back. So that is a very genuine concern where talent can go abroad and you can lose it. But you never know, the appeal of home is always quite great, and often people do return after their study. You can create a bifurcated market in that you've got foreign and local universities, but if it is set up correctly, it should be a situation of sharing of knowledge and systems, processes, policies. There is another potential concern, and that is that you can end up with the university working under two regulatory environments. So, for example, I had MOAT, the Ministry of Education and Training in Vietnam, and all the regulations that went with that, and I also had TESCA in Australia as another quality assurance and regulatory body. So they were quite different quality frameworks, and I had to work with both of them. But often there is a spillover effect as one learns from the other. And so that is a positive outcome. I think that there's been concerns about cultural dominance, but when you have a strong culture, it's really more of a sharing of cultural experiences rather than cultural dominance. And the norms and values are always very strong in an Indigenous context and are very hard to overcome. And in fact, often foreign universities go out of their way to embrace local traditions and norms and values as being part of a good corporate citizen. So I think that the question that you're probably deliberating at the moment is on a continuum. Do you look at building local capacity and enhancing existing organizations? Do you go to the other extent, opening up quite generously for foreign entities to come in? Or do you sit in the middle and perhaps selectively pursue organizations of quality that have perhaps had past experience in entering into a foreign market and actually have assets, educational knowledge and research assets, which could be of value to the country? So I look forward to watching your deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very useful, Dr. McDonald. Dr. Padolina, are you finished, or did you want to add to what you said earlier, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and honorable senators. The views that I will express are limited by my own and do not necessarily reflect the position of the National Academy of Science and Technology. The knowledge economy is sustained by a workforce that has two overarching attributes, namely the ability and knowledge to produce in a sustainable manner globally competitive next generation high valued technologies, products, and services. Let me repeat, globally competitive next generation high valued technologies, products, and services. The second attribute would be fostering social and economic resilience by discovering and creating adjustments to minimize, if not avoid, the negative impacts of disruptive events, natural or man-made, especially on the effects of climate change and the disruptive technologies. This workforce must by necessity be talented, ingenious, and adaptive. Attributes gained through an educational system that is capable of providing the updated knowledge with a global perspective that will allow the Philippine workforce to cope with present and future challenges. The intensified global movement of the knowledge base, the students, professors, instructors, academic programs, educational providers, in the form of collaborative arrangements, campus branches, franchises, and joint degree programs, has motivated several countries in our region to be the premier educational hub in Asia. Some ventured to prepare for that role even in the early 90s and have reached some significant milestones, while a few have realized the importance of an accelerated approach to improve the skills of their workforce before they become victims of the fast-changing global economy. It remains to be seen whether the Philippines will be successful in establishing a niche in the international knowledge enterprise. I understand EDCOM 2 is in the process of identifying the challenges that we face to reform our educational enterprise, requiring nothing less than a systems approach to effect changes at all levels, from K to 12, the undergraduate and graduate degree programs, and the vocational technical programs. In the light of all these imperatives to cope with the challenges to reform the Philippine educational enterprise, I favor, in principle, the entry of only of reputable foreign-owned educational institutions, subject to a well-defined terms of reference, including the conduct of R&D between domestic and international educational institutions. We can leverage our demographic profile and those of other countries in the region, our proficiency with the English language, and the high value that we place on education. Subject to a rigorous, no-nonsense review of the impact of transnational education in several countries in their quest towards a knowledge economy, the following advantages may be cited. Greatly accelerate our efforts to update our educational system to global standards and enhance the academic quality of our higher education institutions. Open opportunities to improve the match of knowledge and skills, expand the coverage and improve the quality of our R&D by making expertise and state-of-the-art facilities available in the country. And lastly, support talent retention in the Philippines by supporting a conducive research and teaching environment. Our current talent deficit is retarding our progress. These are just the major advantages for the Philippines to achieve a critical mass of talented, ingenious, and adaptive workforce. May I reiterate my support in principle for the amendment, knowing fully well that the entry of foreign-owned educational institutions is a complex undertaking and is not without its risks and unintended consequences, especially in the viability of their operations and the impact of their presence vis-a-vis our local, private, and public HEIs. Thus, we need to be guided by the experience of other countries in order to gain confidence that we can learn to manage this important undertaking and fulfill the establishment of the knowledge economy in the shortest possible time. In effecting the change to the crafting of a new law, may I suggest a review of Republic Act 11448 and if still in effect, Shared Memorandum Order Number 2, Series of 2008. This particular amendment should be coupled with other initiatives, particularly those being discussed in EDCOM 2, to make our educational system resilient, robust, and transformative as an effective force in our journey towards a knowledge economy. Sustainably producing globally competitive products and resilient, able to adjust quickly in the face of both the known and unknown disruptive events. This intervention towards a knowledge economy is supportive of the expectations of the science community in its foresight document Pagtanaw 2050 as we work together towards a prosperous, archipelagic, and maritime Philippines. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very good, Dr. Padalina. But unfortunately, we can't really act on some of those recommendations because they're beyond the jurisdiction of the committee. And but definitely they are useful, and we shall write a note to the respective chairpersons dealing with the higher education, Senator Escudero, and maybe on basic education, Senator Gatchalian. Thank you very much. Dr. Licuana, did you want to add to what you said earlier? Yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you will allow me, I have prepared a statement.
Please, ma'am, absolutely.
As a citizen who loves her country and worries about its future, I share the dismay of many over all this fuss about charter change at a time when the country has so many serious problems. I'm not convinced that amending the Constitution is the solution to our economic woes. Foreign direct investments are neither helped nor hindered by the Constitution. FDIs that have recently pledged to come into the country did not make charter change a condition for their entry, and those that have chosen to go elsewhere in the region did not give the so-called restrictive provisions of the Constitution as a factor, but rather named issues such as bureaucracy and corruption. These arguments have been eloquently presented at previous hearings and public fora by Senator Risa Ontiveros economists Winnie Monsod, Cielo Magno, and Sunny Africa, and framers of the 1987 Constitution, notably attorney Christian Monsod, among others. So I need not go over them. Let me just say that I believe that the time and resources being spent and to be spent on charter change is an unconscionable waste. Focusing on Article 14 on educational institutions, I assume the intention of adding the word basic to education at the start of the section is to apply the amendments only to higher education institutions. My general view as an educator is that this distinction is unnecessary because I do not favor amendments to restrictions on foreign ownership of educational institutions at any level. More specifically, I would like to remind everyone, and Mark has so eloquently reminded us, that EDCOM 2 has been convened. The Commission has completed its first year and will continue its work for 2 more years. Let us see what this Commission, which is dedicated to analyzing the situation of education in the country, proposing solutions to problems, and identifying what the system needs in order to develop its full potential to serve all Filipinos, will have to say about foreign ownership of schools. So far, its over 300-page first-year report spells out in no uncertain terms the dimensions of the crisis in Philippine education, but does not even hint at the need for change in the policy on ownership of schools to address these problems. The message to us from EDCOM 2's Year 1 report is, the education crisis is real and it is serious. Let us not waste any time rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. Foreigners holding equity stakes in Philippine schools is not a problem per se, since in principle it would provide sorely needed resources for education. The dangers of possible undue foreign influence on students is mitigated by the fact that DepEd and CHED have well-specified curricula and standards. This model is already an option for stock universities, and many HEIs are productively pursuing partnerships with foreign universities, as we have heard around the room. CHED's internationalization policy encourages and supports this. Such partnerships could and should be developed further without charter change. But don't we want to consider what our neighbors like Singapore and Malaysia have done? My view is that the circumstances are different. The Yale National University of Singapore project stands out for consideration. Singapore wanted to develop the creativity perceived to be missing in their otherwise well-developed and high-performing educational system. They approached Yale to create a first-rate liberal arts college in Singapore. Yale provided the curriculum and the faculty, that is, the intellectual capital. Singapore provided the funds in full. Obviously, this model does not apply in our situation. Incidentally, Singapore decided to end the Yale NUS project, mainly because it was too expensive. In Malaysia, we see another type of experiment, that of foreign university branch campuses, or FUBCs. These are educational institutions, mainly from Australia and the United Kingdom, that have been invited to set up their branch campuses in Malaysia and provide equivalent quality education. This model works well in Malaysia, where university admissions is quite restrictive because of the limited number of universities. This is not the situation in the Philippines. FUBCs also work in Malaysia, where the level of the country's economic development enables a significant number of locals to afford the higher tuition charged by foreign universities. Again, this is not the case in the Philippines. Foreign universities, while possibly attracted by our large young population, will soon discover, after careful market studies, that branch campuses in the Philippines will not be sustainable. So my humble opinion, Your Honors, is on resolution number 6. is no to amendments to economic provisions of the 1987 Constitution and no to foreign ownership of schools. In other words, no to charter change. Let us stop this wasteful and divisive activity and focus on things that really matter before it's too late. Thank you.
That's very clear. Dr. Limlingan, I want to give your point of view. Thank you. Maybe just to clarify the premise of the hearings. No, it's not presenting charter change as a cure-all, meaning it's not saying it's the number one requirement of foreign investors. In fact, in the first hearing, I said, let's not, even if we change the charter, if we don't address things like corruption, bureaucratic red tape, then, you know, it will be for naught. So I think the question must be tweaked a little bit in the sense that it's not an all or nothing approach, meaning do we need charter change at the expense of all the other legislative and administrative reforms? It is more of, will charter change, will amending the charter help bring us to the promised land of a greater prosperity, etc. So I just want to retweak that because a lot of the arguments, even in previous hearings, were, is this the only solution? It's not. Clearly, it's not the only solution. But is it a solution? More. That's the question I'd like to posit to the body. Rather, not is it the only solution, but is it a possible solution alongside a whole slew of other reforms? Because I'm looking at it as a legislator, and I think sometimes we make the mistake of thinking we can solve the world's problems, but we can only do legislation at the end of the day. You know, we cannot do administrative reforms. We're not an anti-corruption body. We can do oversight, but there are limitations. So that's why I think constitutional reform should be viewed through that lens. Is it will it contribute to the reform effort? Not is it the only solution? Yun lang po. Dr. Limlingan, yeah? Are you, if you're ready now?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. When it comes to education, the first and foremost consideration should be the interests of the student. In fact, in our school, we have a motto which says, ang estudyante ay ang ating among tunay. Because it is the reason why we exist. It's really for the students. Now, with respect to looking after the interest of the student, there are two views. No, one is Dr. Milton Friedman, a famous economist who argued that students should be treated as consumers, free to choose the education they want from any accredited educational institution. On the other hand, Henry Ford once famously said that Ford car buyers can choose any color they want so long as it is black. This seems to be the policy of our public education because we have the same curriculum and the same textbook all over. No? So we would argue for giving students a choice, but giving students a choice become academic unless they have a variety of educational systems to choose from. This is done in the private schools, but unfortunately not in public schools. For example, as a parent, I could choose to send my child to a traditional grade school or to Montessori school. But with the public schools, I have no choice. As I said, my only choice of color is black. This is not the case with other educational systems in the world. In the United States, public schools are operated by school boards, which are part of the local government. Under this decentralized system, school boards provide a vast ranges of choice for students. First, there is the traditional public school. Secondly, there are government subsidies such as school vouchers, so students can study for free in different kinds of private schools. Lastly, there are chartered schools, public schools managed by the private sector based on a charter of educational system jointly agreed upon by the public and the private. Note that school vouchers are a critical factor in giving students a meaningful choice. If a poor student has to choose between a free public school and a for-pay private school, there really is no choice. As one private school president noted warily, it is hard to compete with free. It is in this light that we take the position that we should allow non-Filipino entities to operate in the Philippines. We understand that this provision has been placed due to national security considerations. If so, other safeguards can be placed by both our educational institution and national securities to take this place of this prohibition. For allowing non-Filipino educational entities to operate in the Philippines mean more choices and opportunities for our students. We will note that the National Education Policy 2020 of India promises higher educational reform in many areas, and internationalization is prominent among them. The NEP 2020 recommended allowing foreign universities ranked in the top 100 categories to operate in India. Therefore, it is for this reason, thinking of the interests of the student, that we are for allowing more choices for the student in terms of allowing them to come to non-Filipino entities to come in and operate in the Philippines. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for the examples as well, Dr. Lininga. Can we hear from Philippine Association of Private Schools, Colleges, and Universities, Dr. Antonio Del Carmen, who's online, I believe. Dr. Del Carmen, can you hear us, sir?
Yes, good morning.
Yes, from
Good morning.
Top School. Yeah. Morning, sir. Please go ahead.
Well, in behalf of Pop School, we also would like to manifest our position because many of our schools are mainly located in the provinces. These are small, medium-sized colleges and schools in the provinces. And we have this fear or that foreign universities who would come in might influence not only the content of our academic institutions, mostly the small ones, but also economically influence the choices of our students and reduce the viability and feasibility of these small schools. You know? Of course, we are also looking at collaborating and doing joint ventures with these universities and colleges abroad. But our hesitation is on the full ownership of institutions who will open up in our country. You know? So we would like to just manifest and share the interest of our small colleges and universities, mostly in the provinces. And while we are open to doing collaborative work, especially in research and advancing the use of technology in our schools, we also would like to ensure that our small colleges, especially those who are family-owned, can continue to thrive in this environment of continuous learning for our students. So we would like to continuously pursue this conversation with our foreign institutions, as well as discuss the possibility of doing collaborative work. Ownership may be another issue that we should tackle, but we are open doing collaborative work with these other institutions. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Dr. Del Carmen. Can we hear from STI College? We have iAcademy COO Raquel Perez. Morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I may be allowed to read our statement, sir.
Go ahead.
Good morning, honorable members of the Senate, esteemed colleagues. It's nice to see familiar faces. Today, we gather to deliberate upon a matter of utmost importance, the state of the educational sector in the Philippines and the potential need for charter change in response to its myriad challenges. As we navigate through this underscores, it is imperative that we remain steadfast in our commitment to uphold the interest of our nation's youth and the future generations that they represent. As an educational institution that operates nationwide, we have about 67 campuses for STI, 2 campuses for I Academy. We understand the significance of aligning educational standards across different branches or campuses. However, we recognize that true progress begins at the basic education level. While we thrive to provide excellent facilities and interventions at the tertiary level, we acknowledge that without a strong foundation in basic education, these efforts may prove insufficient. Before driving into our stance, I wish to underscore 2 significant concerns within basic education that demand our immediate attention. Firstly, inadequate resources such as classroom facilities continue to hinder the effective delivery of education in many parts of our country. The lack of sufficient infrastructure not only limits access to quality education, but also compromises the learning environment of our students. The absence of proper facilities in institutions remains a persistent challenge, contributing to disparities in educational outcomes. Second, the issue of teacher quality is of paramount importance in shaping the educational landscape of our nation. In a World Bank study revealing the inadequacies in math proficiency among public school teachers underscore the urgency of addressing this issue. Teachers serve as the backbone of our educational system, and their motivation, training, and compensation are vital in assuring the success of our students. Our stand is clear. The current problems plaguing the educational sector do not necessitate charter change, but rather demand greater support and attention directed to education. Allow me to elucidate upon our stance and provide a more overview of the prevailing issues and proposed solutions. First, let us address some of the prominent challenges facing our educational system today. These include the placement of graduates and career pathways, job mismatch, and the alarming dropouts rates attributed to the lack of access as early childhood care and support. These issues underscore the need for intervention, but our focus should primarily be on bolstering basic education as it serves as a foundation upon which all further learning is built. We acknowledge the proposal of charter change, particularly regarding the ownership and management of educational institutions. While there may be arguments in favor of relaxing restrictions on foreign ownership, we must exercise caution and prioritize the preservation of Filipino values and the cultivation of national identity. The Constitution mandates the inclusion of the study of our nation's history, constitution, and values in the curriculum of all educational institutions. These foundational principles are best instilled by Filipino educators who understand the nuances of our cultural heritage. Furthermore, our grating foreign control of education may not address the root causes of our educational challenges. Inadequate resources and the lack of properly motivated, trained, and compensated teachers may remain pressing issues that must be addressed comprehensively. Basic education is not being given the appropriate priority, as evident by insufficient infrastructures and issues raised by the recent report of EDCOM 2. Dropout rates remain alarmingly high, at 4 out of 10 learners dropping out by grade 10, with significant barriers to access and completion faced by marginalized communities. We cannot afford to overlook these challenges by diverting attention towards charter change when the real issue lies in the lack of resources and support. Moreover, while foreign investment in higher education may bring about certain benefits, we must remain vigilant against potential pitfalls such as commercialization, brain drain, and widening socioeconomic disparities. Any initiative to enhance the quality of higher education must be carefully balanced with measures to safeguard national interests and promote equitable access for all. In conclusion, we urge this honorable institution to prioritize the needs of our nation's youth and invest in the foundational pillars of basic education. We echo suggestions from Dr. Bautista, by E.D. Yee, to improve the ease of doing business, perhaps review some regulation and policies and regulatory bodies. Charter change should not be pursued as a panacea for the systematic challenges facing our educational sector. Instead, let's focus on ensuring that every Filipino child has support and access to quality education, facilities equipped with knowledge and skills and values necessary to thrive in an ever-evolving world and contribute meaningfully to our society and uphold our nation's heritage. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. That's very well said. But again, a lot of the recommendations are beyond the jurisdiction of the committee. So if we could just focus on that narrow question before us, which is the question of constitutional change and whether it will help or hinder us. Or whether, I think one thing clear is from all the resource persons or from all the hearings, a recurrent theme is that we are the only ones who have these restrictions in our constitution. And a theme that emerged today so far, an emerging theme today, is the need for targeting, as mentioned by Dr. Patolina, Dr. Bautista, and other resource persons. So that, to me, seems to be an argument to take it out of the Constitution and place it in legislation. So to have greater precision and greater to be able to achieve our aims. Just an impression. Maybe our resource persons could, if they have any comments. Yeah. Could we have Dr. Concepcion, Dr. Gisela, former VP of UP and of course Professor Emeritus at UP and executive member of the National Innovation Council. Ma'am.
Thank you, Senator Angara. Good morning, Senator Risa. So I'd like to present my proposal to build the superstructure. So this is a continuum of higher education, the tertiary and the postgraduate levels, as they relate to R&D and innovation. In the university, well, with due respect to our president, Gigi, the three mandates we uphold are education, teaching and learning, research and creative work, and service, public service, but also private service, okay? And the queen of all of these activities would be new knowledge generation or creation, because this infuses, enriches our teaching and learning and our service. And so I think that we must invest in the superstructure, and I use this term to complement the infrastructure that the legislature invests in a lot. Now, do we invest enough in superstructure? So, next slide, please. So this is data that cannot be denied. It's UNESCO data that's quite old, but it remains true. So on the right lower quadrant is the link between GDP per capita and R&D. And Philippines is the blue triangle. So our GDP per capita today is about $3,500 US. And our GERD, our gross expenditure for R&D is 0.32%. And the other dots you'll see are for the United States, for Germany, and for Japan. And their GDP per capita are in the 60,000, 50,000, 40,000. Next slide, please. There is an imperative to consider R&D and innovation a top national priority. And so the NIASD, that's the National Innovation Agenda and Strategy document that the NEDA came up with, is showing us these core targets. And it's good that the government has already acknowledged that we need to attain these targets. So the root cause of all of our problems is a lack of investment in a human capital, a human talent pool. And right now, by the WIPO data, we only have 174 full-time equivalent researchers per million population. And we want to move that up to 500 by 2028 and to 1,000 by 2032. And our GERD is 0.32% of GDP. We want to move it up to 1% of GDP and to 1.6% of GDP by 2032. Next slide, please. Now, those core targets, if achieved, would allow us to also achieve the other core targets. And it's nice because this document shows us our knowledge and technology outputs and our creative outputs. And they're data generated by, the GII. So this has been recognized by our government, by NEDA. Next slide, please. So do the comparison. Again, the data is from the WIPO, and our information is in the blue column. And we are being compared and contrasted with Indonesia, Thailand, and Vietnam. And we're actually being benchmarked with Indonesia at the present by the ADB. But let us tell you what we have in the country. And there is great opportunity because we have graduate in science and engineering of 22.8% of total graduates. And I'm trying to get that number of total graduates from the CHED. But I just got this from the PSA. 1.1 million high school graduates go into the academic track, and 500,000 go to the tech voc track. And we don't know what the graduation rate is. We know there is not 100% or even close to it. But if you go by these numbers, there are enough STEM graduates that we could move or channel into the postgraduate level, which would be required for independent research and innovation. So in UP, we are trying to increase the number of PhDs among our faculty. So when I was VPAA of UP, I aimed to move it from 30% to 50% to reach Thailand's requirement of 70% for national universities and Malaysia's requirement for 90% for their national universities. Okay, but
Sorry, just to clarify that requirement.
yes,
What are we requiring? Sorry.
PhD level
Number of
faculty
PhDs from state universities, from national universities, public
for a
universities.
national university to be,
Just the
identified as
main
national.
university. Yeah.
In Thailand, at least 7% PhD
70,
faculty.
70.
And Malaysia, 90%. By now, it's 100%. Okay?
It's
And
a little challenging, President Gigi. No?
po, kaya po yun yung ano ngayon banner ano ni President increase the number of PhDs in UP. Okay, so anyways, that's number of researchers. We are 174 researchers per million population, hindi po lahat yan PhD. Look at Thailand, they have 10 times our number, 1,790 per million population. Vietnam has 4 times our number, Madam McDonald, 4 times. Indonesia has about double ours, okay? And then for our GERD, well, Indonesia is the same level, but it's got a huge GDP, huge GDP. Of course, their population is also bigger, but we're, catching up like 115 and they're 200. And then look at Thailand invests 1.1% and Vietnam invests 0.5%. This data is probably not the most accurate. It's 2022. Next slide, please. So what good is infrastructure without the superstructure? So in my closing remarks at the NIASTI launch last September, I championed this goal to increase our experts to 500 in 2028 to 1,000 per million population in 2032, and to increase our GERD from 0.3% to 1% by 2028. And with a GDP of the Philippines in 2022 of about $400 billion, and it has grown larger in 2023, and we expect it to grow even more. Current GERD of 0.3% of GDP translates to USD $1.2 billion. How much more do we need to spend for GERD? $2.8 billion more. Now, what good is spending all the $2.8 billion if you do not have the PhD level experts who can make use of that money very well? Bottom line is, it's all about the people. It's all about talent, development, and retention. Next slide, please. So, we know that the government is championing digitalization. Okay, fintech, digitech, of course, space tech, and AI IT expertise. That's very important. But I said to our entrepreneurs, startups, venture capitalists, MSMEs, and future innovators among our youth, we wish to see you transform your this into reality, we hope many more will pursue and invest in higher value agri-tech, aqua-tech, biotech, food tech, health tech, energy tech, materials tech, climate tech, recycling tech, aside from those other virtual techs. And many enterprises engaged in social innovation be the prime movers of socio-economic transformation of communities through the growth of circular economies in rural areas of our country. So innovation is not just about utilization and commercialization for CROI, it's also about social return on innovation in our communities in the regions. Next slide, please. So these are all guesstimates, or estimates, but they're very, I think, revealing and very, very meaningful, at least to me. The GDP of the Philippines, as we said, is about 400 billion. At a population of 115 million, GDP per capita is 3,500, and that's searchable. We know that. Now, we were told that 35% of the Philippine GDP, or 140 billion, is contributed by 1.9 million MSMEs, which I consider to be our middle class. This translates to about $74,000 GDP per MSME. Okay, we know MSMEs, they can really be micro, small, or medium. Assuming an MSME spends 50% for employee wages and an MSME has 15 employees, these are all assumptions, each employee earns $2,500 a year, or $210, or 12,000 pesos a month. What about marginalized communities in the Philippines? They do not earn enough income. Coconut farmers until today earn 5,000 a month. Farmers and fisher folk are the poorest communities in our country. So what has superstructure got to do with this? Productivity, quality and quantity of produce, of products, of services and systems of MSMEs and farmer and fisher folk communities can be significantly improved with advanced innovative technologies. Next slide, please. So my proposal is to develop the Philippine superstructure by building the Philippine Advanced Technology Innovation Institute for Industry. Secretary R.C. Balisacan names it PATICube, so he supports this, and so does the DTI Secretary and the innovation workforce. And this provides you the brain flow. It provides you the two-way corridor, okay? People coming in here and our own most talented, brightest students going out and hand-holding them, shepherding them back to the Philippines with the right incentives, okay? Through a definitive massive investment in superstructure, advanced S&T human capital development, recognizing its singular, most critical role in driving and sustaining over the long term innovation-based competitiveness of Philippine industries. And this is aligned with the priorities of the Asian Development Bank, to which I wanted to submit this proposal, and the administration of President Ferdinand Marcos Jr., which would be agriculture and food security in the context of climate change. So here we propose the establishment of an innovation institute and a massive postgraduate study abroad program. Next slide, please. Investing in the human talent pool. The critical role of S&T human capital development to sustain technological development and economic progress over the long term, improve the quality of life of a population, is recognized in all technologically advanced countries. It's the single most important definitive investment for sustained progress. Development of the human workforce or human capital resources, the advanced education and training of its brightest youth. Next slide, please. We have models. We have models abroad. So we have them in Japan, South Korea, China, Taiwan, India, Pakistan, national countries such as Singapore, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam, who have invested in S&T HCD, sending thousands of their brightest students to the US and Europe for advanced studies. It's a numbers game. Taiwan sent 30,000 of their best and brightest decades ago. 3,000 came back, and they made all the difference in Taiwan, including Morris Chung of MIT and Stanford and Texas Instruments, who set up the Taiwan Semiconductor Company, TMS, largest provider of semicons in the world, the wafers. Okay. Challenge in the Philippines is directly linked to the creation of S&T knowledge and innovation with utilization, commercialization, and economic prosperity. And for our model, we could do the Fraunhofer model of a public-private partnership for applied research in business innovation in Germany. The link between scientific research and entrepreneurial growth is very close and well structured. So this is from the website. Every euro of public expenditure invested yields 3 to 4 euros in GDP. Oh, that's very tough, but it's being achieved. And postgraduate studies, theses and dissertations, and R&D programs can be modeled after those in the Humboldt universities and Max Planck research institutes in Germany, RIKEN in Japan, Academia Sinica in Taiwan, done in partnership with universities. I'll tell you at this time from my SWOT analysis what the threats are. So we do have bright grassroots talents in our country, in the University of the Philippines and other SUCs all over the country. They still speak English well. We have a very young population. So what is Germany, what are other countries doing? They are recruiting them. They are already recruiting them directly because these countries have very low populations. They have reduced populations now. So, you know, they're just trying to get our best and brightest. So what do we do to stem this threat that we're facing? Next slide, please. What are the antecedents in the Philippines? This one we have to recognize. Let's just accept it. You know, we did not do well. No massive investment of the Philippine government in postgraduate studies abroad of its best and brightest from the 1960s and through the decades. Nothing, none. Instead, reliance on relatively few foreign scholarships. Rockefeller, Ford Foundation, Fulbright, World Bank, East-West scholarships. Significant number of these PhD graduates in the 70s and 80s did not come home for good. There was nothing to come home for. So it's really chicken egg. The government did not handhold, did not provide opportunities here. Programs that did not make a lasting, significant impact on knowledge creation in the country, I just have to identify them. And I will mention PICARI later. ESSEP, Foreign PhD Scholarship Program in the 80s and 90s. Just a few came home, and they made some difference. PhD Consortium of UP, Ateneo, LaSalle, and UST in the 80s and 90s, you know, moderate success, but it did not provide a critical mass. Establishment of the National Science Complex in UP Diliman and the National Science Consortium in the mid-2000s, okay, helped by the late Congressman Villafuerte, and the establishment of the ERDT program in the mid-2000s with sponsorship of the late Senator Ed Angara. Next slide, please. With all due respect, President Gigil, I have to present our graduation data of the UP graduate programs. Also, due respect to VPAA Cynthia Bautista. This is our graduation rate in UP. Doctoral, 193. Masteral, 1,517. So we don't even have 2,000 graduates in UP in 2023. So I got this from our ADPAA. Next slide, please. What is the national budget in 2024? I read it in the papers. It's 5.768 trillion, or that's about 100 billion US dollars. Okay. So what is my proposal budget for building the superstructure? It's only 1 billion US dollars, but that's not even to fill what we need in terms of our full-time equivalent researchers, MS and PhD levels. Because if you are to address the NIASD core targets by 2020 and beyond, first we need the 2.8 billion to spend. We need to spend, and that is why you're here, Honorable Senator, because it's legislature can pass the law over the long term, provide a justification for budget allocation. But initially, this is being pursued by the National Innovation Council, executive branch of government. So, as we said, what good is the 2.8 billion if you don't have the research leaders? So we need 326 full-time equivalent researchers per million population, or with a population of 150 million, we need 37,000 plus FTE researchers. Next slide, please. What are the foreign models? This you are familiar with. You are familiar with the MIT Harvard Nexus and the Silicon Valley Stanford University of California System Nexus. You see, that's why we worked with PICARI. Small Business Innovation Research, SBIR grants to researchers are a major investment in innovation of the US government, which has yielded numerous commercialization success stories. And one of our recipients of the SBAR is none other than Dr. Gonzalo Serafica. We work together in the Philippine American Academy of Science and Engineering. So he's a recipient of this. The explosive growth of biotechnology industry from the nascent stage in the last decades is attributed in large part to SBIRs. $100,000 and the next tranche $750,000. Successful cases of engagement of leading private US universities in foreign countries are well documented. We already heard it from Dr. Cynthia Bautista and others, but I'd like to point out one of our top scientists who's a plant geneticist, rice geneticist at that. He's Michael Puganan, our graduate from chemistry, just like me. And he was Dean of Science of New York University and also a leader of the NYU Genomics Institute. And he was asked to set it up in Abu Dhabi. And he was able to do it for $10 million over 5 to 7 years. And he was awarded the nation's top science award because of his efforts. I'd like to add Singapore's USD 30 million investment in the MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Smart Group in Singapore, which eventually led to the establishment of the highly successful Singapore University of Technology and Design, currently graduating hundreds of engineers annually, with SUTD topping MIT's list of emerging engineering schools. So it's just telling you the ripple effect. The amplification effect is so important. You may not want the foreigners to be here forever or even in the lower grade schools. I don't think they're really part of the SUTD anymore. That's already run by Singaporeans. So there's an exit plan for this, no? So we are always reminded about this in Taiwan. The Thai, the Malaysians, now the Cambodians, they come to our universities 5 to 10 years. Okay na, they're ready. They can do it on their own because that's exactly what the Taiwanese did. They went to the United States and then now they have National Taiwan University. They have all these great universities which are of world-class standards based in the US system, and they are graduating their own top graduates. So I'd like to emphasize here that if we are going to pursue this, and I think we must, thing that we must address is intellectual property regimes. Especially now because the world is moving towards this open innovation system. Because of climate change and other very urgent matters that face us beyond our control, we have to work together. Universities collaborate, hospitals collaborate, business and universities collaborate, academia. And that's what you call the open innovation system. And so you have to just identify what is your IP position. Don't be too very possessive of your IP. This is what I learned from the the Nanyang Technological University president who attended the ADB workshop, and he said, in NTU, we share. We do not really value our IP this much. And why is that? Why does that work? Next slide, please. Okay, I think mabilis na, no? So, because in many universities, Australia as well, IP can be sold upfront. It's bargained well, but then the university then gets a return on the investment from, say, the Department of Science and Technology, and so they're given more research money. So there's now research revenue for the university. Okay, pero upfront. Instead of trying to hang on through royalties, then you're able to sell the innovation that needs a little more tweaking or a lot more tweaking before it's commercialized, right? So there's a lot more that needs to be done. So might as well the knowledge creators in university move on and embark on new projects and get new funding from the DOST. So this is our proposal, and that's the priorities: agriculture and fisheries technologies for food productivity and security, which is like the priority of the UP Los Baños; renewable and nuclear energy technologies for clean, cheap, and continuous energy. And we need collaborators for this. We learned this from Taiwan, from our Taiwan partners. Metallurgical and materials technologies for metal industry, stainless steel, iron, other metals. For energy storage, batteries, and semiconductors, we need to develop our green metals, get the best value from nickel and cobalt, which we sell for a song to our neighboring countries. For industrial machinery, additive manufacturing, 3D printing for replacement of machine parts, robotics, automation for health and chemical industries, petrochemicals, and organic chemicals. Okay, all of the above in the context of environmental stability, sustainability, and digital AI enabling automation technologies and other cross-cutting technologies. Bottom line, direct beneficiaries would be MSMEs and large industries. Next slide, please. So here we have how we think it might work. Unique features of the PATI-Q we call it. Would be an attached unit of the DTI focused on serving industry. Would be in a PEZA zone, centrally located in the fastest growing concentration of local and foreign industry locators and surrounded by several leading universities. This could be in the Calabar zone or it could be in the Central Luzon zone. Enabling procurement and hiring terms, tax exemptions, and export incentives under PEZA and BOI. This is how we would try to solve our procurement problems up front. Initially, it doesn't mean that we will not continue to work on our various modes of procurement, especially for the R&D and innovation community. New intellectual property regimes supported by the IPOFIL, getting a world-renowned Philippine expatriate scientist, engineer, and innovation management expert who will serve as an attractant to foreign-based Filipino scientists and foreign scientists. We should get the exodus of our expert scientists, the diaspora, going. They should come home to the Philippines for good. Recruit world-class Philippine expatriate and foreign scientists-led research teams, not individuals, in the priority areas identified. So the problem in the past is we're always recruiting them individually. But actually in UP Los Baños, in the past, there was already a model where we sent out research groups of researchers, and then they came back as groups as well. So it works. That you need a research team. I haven't been a wet lab researcher myself for many, many years.
Dr. Concepcion,
Yes.
with your permission,
Yes.
you've been speaking for 27 minutes.
Yeah, just 3 minutes more.
And do you have a view? Do you have a stand on constitutional reform?
Yes, I think Senator Angara, I think
Yes.
that with this kind of ecosystem that I am describing to you,
Yes.
I think that we should allow foreign researchers to be employed in the Philippines, to have foreign PPPs, FDIs, because we lack the experts in our country.
Okay.
See, so it's really a case of not having enough of the mentors for research and innovation. And
This is really a fantastic paper, and then I wish we
Yeah.
called you during our Tatak Pinoy hearing.
well,
That was all about creating
yes,
ecosystem. So we in
Yes.
the oversight of the law, I think
yeah,
there's a lot to
absolutely.
dialogue on, and
yeah,
I'll let you wrap up. But
please.
I think what you need here is scalability, Dr. Concepcion.
yeah.
I think what you need is, if you allow me to finish, I think you need some scalability here, and because the reality is we work in political cycles of 3 years. So I suggest you work on a 3-year initial cycle where you can have established results that you can show, and then that would justify a higher budget in the next cycle. That's just my modest suggestion. Please go ahead.
Thank you,
ma'am.
Senator. So in the features here, I just mentioned that we really need to take care of everyone, the private higher education institutions, as well as the SUCs and of course UP. And so we would be offering joint master's and PhD degree programs with leading private and public universities in this center. Okay, and it's really modeled after the German technological universities and research institutes, which is industry-centric. Next slide, please. So PPP is very important, including local and foreign PPPs. First of all, UP partner, for example, with the leading private universities, aside from the SUCs. Okay, so when we have this person that I, would like to serve as the magnet to lead PICARI. And in the case of PICARI, it was first conceptualized as a UC partnership. But then we made it more inclusive, so it was passed on to CHED. And the mirror institutes in UP were vetoed by President Pinoy when he visited UP with Chair Tati then. There are too many ERD buildings, but then the whole model just kind of collapsed because in those mirror institutes here, UC Berkeley faculty and researchers would spend a little time, have their full-time postdocs, and then our faculty and researchers would opt in to do their research and generate new knowledge. So that was the model that was not really followed. That's why it's, we would say, it's just a moderate success. Okay, so Dr. Puruganan did it properly in NYU Abu Dhabi. So there's revenue sources for sustainability. And that's like the conceptual framework for PatiCube, and you would create an innovation town. And then central to it would be social innovation and transformation, climate change, and environmental sustainability, because this kind of innovation is not possessive about intellectual property. It really has the community benefit at heart. And workforce education and training, governance, education and engineering, heart of it. So there's just a model of how it would grow, and then the funding is there, and it would be augmented through PPPs and FDIs. And there's a model that works in Kaohsiung that the president, UP president, has visited, the Linhai Eco Industrial Park, where they share resources. So it's open innovation, and there are models of this in the universities in Taiwan. And this would have to be complemented by the massive postgraduate master's and PhD study abroad program. So out and in, coming out and in, and then the PATIC 3 would provide opportunities for employment for these. Again, send them out as groups, then find a rational plan to make it equitable and inclusive through the regions, and provide attractive scholarship packages with incentives, with assurance of employment in university, research institute, private industry upon return to the region. And actually, there's a proposal that industry could be the provider of the scholarship and would sit in the thesis of the student. So there would be choices, many categories of thesis and dissertation, say, in the university. Okay, so there's the budget. And let me just say that we're not picking this up out of the blue. The Indonesian LPDP scholarship program was begun in 2011 to the tune of tens of billions of US dollars. Tens of billions of US dollars. I think you can move it to the next slide. And the priorities are the same as ours. So there are now 25,000 scholars of Indonesia in countries abroad, and they're starting to come home. But the funding there is with an endowment fund, but also it's to the tune of tens of billions of US dollars. So that ends my presentation. Thank you so much, Senator Angara, for allowing me to speak for 30 minutes.
Thank you very much. No, it's a really fantastic, very ambitious proposal, and I think there's a lot to expand on there, and hopefully we can continue that dialogue. Dr. Concepcion, thank you very much. Now we'll go to, of course, we heard from UP, so I think we have to hear from Ateneo and La Salle as well. So we have the former Dean of the Ateneo School. Sorry, we'd like to acknowledge the presence of Senator Tolentino, who used to be the chair of the Senate Committee on Science and Technology. Senator Tolentino, good afternoon.
Just a few minutes before our resource persons would continue and before you can have your lunch. I listened partly to the dissertation made by Dr. Concepcion, but Mr. Chairman, I am now familiar, half familiar, not familiar, and perhaps this group would be familiar with a new concept that probably could take off from the existing PPP. I heard PPP, that's been for decades a public-private partnership. It would seem, Mr. Chairman, I just came from a a trip with a group of local government officials. It would seem that the buzzword right now, and it's not just a mantra, but the model right now is not PPP. They call it triple helix. Triple helix. And if you're familiar with triple helix, it would show us the intertwine between the government sector, industry, and knowledge institutions. And a good visual model for this would perhaps be Silicon Valley. You'll be looking at San Jose State University, Santa Clara University, University of California, Berkeley, and Stanford University. So the dynamics would now involve the government partnering with industry, and as what Dr. Concepcion mentioned a while ago, the university producing the innovation, serving as a startup hub, and perhaps producing the next members for the industry and the government itself. So that's what I learned from the Netherlands, which started Shell. Shell is about helix, and helix, if you can visualize this, helix is a sort of an intertwined rope or nerve system. So my question here would probably be on top of my mind, and I'm propounding this to the resource persons present. You can answer this as part of your presentation, or you can come back when the good chairman would have another regional public hearing. How can a triple helix formula serve the Philippines, and would it need a constitutional amendment? Would it need a constitutional amendment? Because we're now looking at the university. What if the university is involved in a program that is still restrictive? What if the university, for instance, is involved in a program somewhere in Palawan or Puerto Princesa? We have a state university there, which would be involved in production of gas and oil, natural gas, among others. So that's my little contribution, Mr. Chairman, because we're talking about constitutional change in the education sector. How can the education sector, as part of that triple helix, propel a Philippine or leapfrog a Philippine economy to higher bars? Siguro po yun ang dapat nating masagot. I'm not proposing that, but you can search what a triple helix is all about. There might be more better academic definitions of this, but I would say that it would perhaps emphasize the collaboration, interaction between the university, the industry, and the government, which is what the Philippines would need right now. And the chairman, as the chairman likewise of the Senate Committee on Youth and Sports, is knowledgeable that we have an abundant pool of youth leaders, students who eventually will be part of the industry and the government as well. Yun lamang po, Mr. Chairman, ang may aambag ko ngayong umaga.
Yeah, very. Thank you very much, Senator Tolentino. Yun din po yung I was hoping we could have more of those conversations going forward, because I have no doubt that we produce the graduates, but yun lang, ang my worry is always where they will end up. And as mentioned by some of our resource persons, if we don't have that ecosystem, then there will be that brain drain. We will just be educating for migration. That's the reality. That's been the reality of the past decades of our policy. That's why I have also in our interactions in the EDCOM, we've raised that we must be talking about that ecosystem, not limiting ourselves to the educational policies we have, but also the industrial policies, because otherwise they don't have that synergy that Senator Tolentino was mentioning. If one of those links is weak, then there'll be no sustainability. So thank you, Senator Tolentino. So if we can hear from the Ateneo School of Government, we have Dr. Mendoza, former Dean, Dr. Mendoza, who is also an economist by profession. Dr. Ron, are you online?
Yes, I am.
Yes,
Sani.
Thank you for waiting, Dr. Ron. Please go ahead. Yes.
Well, Chair Sani and our senators, good morning, and also to our colleagues in the education sector. I apologize that I am not there physically, but I trust that the discussions are going quite well, and I've been following from here at home. I have prepared remarks, but I thought it better to just start off with a few quick comments to draw on the insights already shared. It has been such a rich exchange of ideas this morning. So my series of comments, I'll go ahead and share it. Number one, I thought to mention the context of what we're doing here, which is basically where our country is compared to when our constitution was crafted. And I took a look at the history and the statistics of our demographics. And I would just like to share with everyone that roughly 70% of our population was not even born yet when this constitution was crafted. And when it was crafted, the country was a different country then, the world was a different world then. And now we have obviously recently recovered from a pandemic, which has severely affected our country, but also many other countries. But also we have begun to open up to a new world where there are geopolitical risks, the opportunities and challenges of the fourth industrial revolution, and many other changes that will need to inform our development strategy. So I think that this is the bigger context, and I believe that Sensani has a plan to sort of integrate this discussion on the education sector with the overall development planning agenda of the country based on the hearings that he's conducting. So just to point that out and to also remind our colleagues that our country is not exactly a pushover anymore. We are no longer considered the sick man of Asia, which we were in the 70s and 80s when we had the economic crisis back then. Our economy is set to hit $1 trillion mark by 2033, and we're set to hit upper middle income country mark by 2025. With, if all goes well, we are set to reduce poverty to single digits, within the administration or maybe a few years after. So we are a market also for some of these direct investments. And it just struck me, just listening to the discussion, that there is on the one hand, a very heavy state focus, possibly because UP is well represented in the testimonies. But also we need representation from the private sector, and it doesn't seem to be as confident as what I'm hearing from the state-focused sort of interventions. So I think there's something there to unpack, Sensani. And certainly the discussion on opening up must accommodate both. And I think you're onto something there when you discuss this idea of using a very specific focused strategy on opening up and not necessarily looking at an opening up that immediately affects all sectors. So that's my first sharing. My second is I think we need to look at the education sector as one of the most important levers of our economic development plan. And it cannot be looked at in isolation. It must be looked at, according to Carol Mark and President Gigi, as an ecosystem, as part of a bigger plan with many moving parts, and our education sector needs to deliver. And so I think our development plan, it can be very instructive and very useful in juxtaposing where our education sector is expected to deliver, because our development plan has a few big components, including what SecRC calls the servicification of our manufacturing push. Now, this is part of our industrial policy strategy to leverage what we are competitive in order to make our mark in manufacturing, even though we are very, very delayed in actually trying to make a push in this sector. As you know, there is Vietnam, there is Indonesia, there are many other countries that have actually pushed on manufacturing well ahead of us. And if you look at the most recent literature, including by thought leaders like Danny Roderick at the Kennedy School of Government, looking at industrial policy today, post-pandemic, they're saying that we cannot really look at low-cost manufacturing anymore in this new world. We're looking at tech-enhanced manufacturing. We're looking at automation. We're looking at the important role of AI and many other aspects which will put a heavy emphasis on services. And that's where the education sector clearly contributes, because it is in itself a service sector. And secondly, its output contributes to many other service sector components that will be important in our manufacturing push and in our development plan. So that's my second point. The third point is, I think, based on those who shared that they have reservations about economic charter change, there is an interpretation that it will fix all, that it will cure all. I join Sani in reminding our colleagues that that is not how we should look at this discussion. It will leverage many other things that we need to do, because there are many other parts in the industrial policy that need to be focused on, many other legislation that needs to be passed in order for us to succeed in this goal. And so I'm reminded by my industrial policy professor, Danny Roderick, who said, you know, openness is not a development strategy. And that is certainly not what we're communicating here, that if we open up the sector, suddenly all things will fall into place. In fact, it will increase the number of things we need to do well, and the load on our institutions and the load on our governance. So tama po yung mga comments nila Chair Tati at saka ang other colleagues, Dr. Bautista, who shared their concerns about whether we will bring about more good out of this rather than more costs and more social disruption. That is actually the reality of industrial policy and increased economic openness, that there are risks, but those risks, a nation needs to decide whether it takes them if it wants the bigger gains. So my question to our colleagues and maybe to our senators is, can we afford not to take this risk and basically remain closed while the rest of our region has actually decided to open up, integrate, and take those risks to actually latch onto the technology and know-how that we know will shape this decade of development? So yun po yung usapin ngayon. I think we are all concerned about the risks, and if we focus on them and try to address them one by one, I think we can probably do that too. But there is a bigger question. If we don't act, there is also a risk to that. We will be continuously left behind. That is a big risk. And finally, let me share the concerns of some of our colleagues, and since I teach in the School of Government, read a little bit of my closing statement here, if you'll allow me, Chair Sani. Several attempts have already been made by reformists in various post-EDSA administrations to advance economic charter change, to continue to expand the scope and ambition of our economic development. There is considerable evidence that loosening the restrictive economic provisions in the Constitution can form part of a broader agenda to boost foreign investments and create jobs for Filipinos so that many do not need to leave for greener pastures abroad. That reform agenda must include reforms to boost independent regulatory agencies and strengthen social protection for those that may be affected by openness. We must improve the inclusiveness of our market economy so that we don't fear economic openness and instead see this as a way to provide jobs for our youth and bring back home our millions of OFWs. It is also a key component of bolstering our national security, since economic development always goes hand in hand with strong national defense. We will never be a secure country if we continue to be left behind economically. Our biggest challenge then on each attempt is that deep distrust in our political system and our ability to conduct the industrial policy fairly, transparently, and successfully. End of the day, if and when we open up to competition, our institutions and our governance need to level up also so that we don't end up on the losing side. We must overcome this in order to strengthen our chances to compete successfully. Thank you very much, Chair Sani, for listening to these quick comments, and thank you to everyone.
Well, thank you. Very good, very strong insight regarding openness not being a strategy per se, and it leading to actually needing more vigilance. I think that's very powerful insight. And thank you for a progressive and hard-nosed, but yet hard-nosed stance. Thank you very much, Dean Ron. We'd like to acknowledge our majority leader, who's the former head of TESDA, which is a very important agency in this discussion, and also a member of the EDCOM, aside from being the Senate Majority. Good afternoon, Majority Leader Senator Joel. If you please, you're free to interject at any point.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just like to put on record my sincerest thanks to our chairperson, especially for calling for this hearing. This is very informative, educational, and historic, I would say. We'd like to give our regards to our resource persons here. It's there's too many personalities here that we have worked with, and if I one by one I acknowledge, Mr. Chairman, baka maubos yung time ko, but will participate later. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Familiar to you in EDCOM. A lot of familiar faces from the EDCOM. Next, from DLSU, De La Salle University, we have the chairperson of the Committee on National Issues, Dr. Hasmin Liana, along with Mr. Ricky Kabuksa. You're both free to speak. And after that, just for Dr. Serafica, Dr. Destura, Dr. Coelho, Attorney Castillo, Attorney Rosales, and Attorney Carpio. Thank you very much for waiting patiently. Dr. Liana, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and the honorable senators and members of the community. I came here on behalf of our president of De La Salle University, Brother Bernard Oka, FSC, and we are not ready with any position yet. The governing bodies of the university and our Committee on National Issues and Concerns will be discussing this issue, and we are going to submit a position paper. I would like to say, however, that I can say confidently, as chair of the Committee on National Issues and Concerns of the university, that I can provide a short answer, and I'm confident that the university will go along this path. And that is the short answer of no, we don't need any constitutional change in order to address the education crisis. And we will hopefully be able to provide all of the supporting arguments for this position. Thank you very much.
Dr. Liana. How about Mr. Kabuksa? No, no position there. Okay, we go to Dr. Serafica, President of the Center for Integrated STEM Education System. Morning. Good afternoon, Dr. Serafica.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Honorable Senator Angara and Senator Joel and Senator Risa for inviting us over. Actually, I'm also the chairman of the Philippine American Academy of Science and Engineering, a 700 members strong international PhD level scientists and engineers. But I'll take it down a level and a more personal, because I do look at the actual request for us to provide our insights to the ongoing discussions about opening it up for foreign. I come from the United States. I spent 24 years of my schooling as well as being an entrepreneur for 17 years, managing a biotech medical device company. And actually, I look back, what allowed me to do that is a very strong university industry partnership.
Doctor, sorry, where are you based?
I'm now based in the Philippines. I'm a balik scientist.
But for those 24 years, where were you based?
I was in New York. I went to Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in Troy, New York. And I did spend most of my time in the Northeast. And clearly, to me, the importance of opening it up for foreign institutions with existing industrial partnerships is what I wanted to highlight to our educators as well as our research persons in the audience. Actually, after finishing up my PhD, I ended up starting a company. As Giselle mentioned, I did receive a small business innovative research grant that allowed me to raise venture capital and run my company for 17 years, and having sold it to Johnson & Johnson eventually in 2 pieces. So I retired at 45. I came back as a balik scientist actually in 2013, just to help the technology commercialization and intellectual property expansion in the Philippines. And I've been doing that with UP for the last 10 years. Also, of La Salle, I'm a member
With due respect po, Sir Juan Reyes, baka hindi po kayo nakakakita pa ng mga working lunch, no? Tinatawag po dyan working lunch. Even conferences and other activities na ginagawa po, wala pong lunch break, no? Tuloy-tuloy po yan, no? Hindi po yan restaurant na katulad ng iniisip nyo, no? Maging, naman tayo, maging matured naman ang pag-iisip natin. Baka hindi ka pa po nakakaranas ng working lunch, no? Nagtatrabaho habang nagla-lunch. Ganyan po yan. Pinapakita mo lang yung kabubuhan mo.
Of the National Academy of Science and Engineering and Technology here in the Philippines. I work with Senator Padolina. But what's emerging with us, at least, I've been in the ecosystem of science and technology in the Philippines.
At lumalabas, Mr. Juan Reyes, na ikaw yung walang GMRC at wala kang alam sa buhay mo.
For the last 10 years. And I must speak that what Dr. Yi mentioned about the ecosystem. We're building a cathedral here. We're all bricklayers, but we're building a cathedral. And I've been here for 10 years. And I've been trying to actually look at where the gaps are. And
What do we have? Do we have a turret? Do we have
I wish
a few pews? Or what do we have of the cathedral?
we do have the foundations, I must say. And actually, over the last 10 years that I've seen $10 billion, 10 billion pesos poured into R&D. I think we have a few posts and a few doors, but it's not yet complete. Our roof is not there yet, so we're not sheltering the rest of our people in doing that. And what I'm doing projects on social emotional learning for 21st century skills, as well as technical vocational education with a USAID project for advanced manufacturing. There are gaps in almost every step of the way, and being able to welcome in foreign institutions that can plug in the gap, accelerate our adoption of best practices, as well as being able to partner with local industry. I was part of the USAID STRIDE project. I was senior advisor of STRIDE 1 and 2 for 9 years. It's a $38 million project. And I was focused on academic industry partnerships. We don't have enough industry partnerships. And how much more with international? We just finished our National Academy Technical Working Group last week. We were focused on globally linking R&D of the Philippines to the global ecosystem. And right now, one way of accelerating that indeed is opening it up for foreign institutions with existing industry partners. So I do support, as a person, but definitely from the Philippine American Academy of Science and Engineering, I'm sure great deal of our members are foreign-based, about probably 200 of them, will be more than happy and willing to lend their support with their own institutions abroad to be linked to our ecosystem here in the Philippines. So I'm hoping it will be the beginning of many conversations on knowledge economies as well as how to make money with science. And I'm here as a resource person for the Senate, I guess, moving forward. Thank you.
We'll need you, sir. We'll need you. Thank you. And just for the record, USAID STRIDE project has given birth to other programs like the DTI road mapping in Region 7, in advanced technologies. So that project has been useful. And we're trying to replicate it in various regions, actually, especially the rural areas. So thank you, Dr. Seraphic.
Thank you.
Dr. Destura, Professor of the National Institute of Health for UP Manila and Deputy Director of the Strategic Initiatives and Emerging Programs of the NIH UP Manila. Dr. Destura, thank you for waiting patiently. Good afternoon, sir.
Thank you, Honorable Chair, for having me here. Senator Villanueva, Senator Tiveros, Senator Gatchalian. I think...
Your permission, I failed to acknowledge our chairperson of the EDCOM and our basic education and ways and means chair. So he actually occupies a good, if we're talking about the ecosystem of education, academia and industry, he's an important personality because he's on the economic and the education side. Senator Win Gatchalian. Good afternoon, sir. Would you like to say anything before we go back? Doctor, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm also coming in my comment on a personal, as a scientist who came back. So I've seen the education component from both here in the Philippines and the perspective it actually has provided me when I was outside, also learning from them. But of course, it's not for everyone to say that you get educated and then you have to come back. Others prefer to stay over there for various reasons. and I had my own reason why I wanted to come back to the Philippines. But the point I'm driving at here is that globalization of education is really a huge leap for most of us because we are already, the world's shrinking. And what happens to us here affects what's out there, and what's happening out there obviously affects us here. So instead of trying to put walls into the institution of learning, maybe we can be more open to accept what's new and what is actually important to make our organization or country grow. Of course, it's very important that in our mind we have to retain our culture, our identity as a country. But globalizing our idea doesn't mean losing ours. And the opportunities that we can actually expose ourselves to the knowledge. I was a clinician when I left the country in infectious disease. I came back as a trained in biotechnology. So that's why for the first time through this journey, we created our first, from the University of the Philippines. That created most of the local technologies that we are developing now. But what is 30 minutes in Singapore took me 3 years here. So, it's not a complaint. It's a realization of what's actually happening and why the struggles for the technology transfer is happening between industry and the academe. That particular link is the one that is very challenging because of because of our existing policies and rules. The question I have in my mind, because I'm not a lawyer or an expert in legalities, is are the current policies can actually be modified to accommodate all of these problems that we're facing right now? Or does it really require a change of the entire constitutional setup? Because if the policies can actually be improved without these major things to improve the things that we're advocating from the very beginning, then maybe we just have to improve on things rather than changing the entire household. So in my mind, I do believe that science and technology is a major contributor of the gross domestic product or the GDP of the country. And it's not a new idea. It's been proven over and over and over again. That's why there are more than 3,000 science and technology parks all over the world, and over 157,000 companies coming out on a yearly basis, generating programs. When Singapore hit a certain level of their growth, they went to science and technology as a tool for economic growth, increasing their GDP from 1.8 to increasing an additional 3.4% of their GDPs coming entirely from biomedical sciences in the manufacturing division. A small corner and office can generate hundreds and millions based on intellectual property alone. You don't need an entire island or an entire continent to be able to generate those. And that's how powerful and borderless innovative ideas are. And for our Filipinos I am so inspired by my young students, scientists. They are amazing, they're extremely talented, but they lack some tools, some exposure on best practices and what could have been. So these are just some of the areas that I could feel would help us move things further, because I know that there are certain components in the ecosystem that are not covered in this meeting, but are also hopefully will run in parallel, because the ecosystem, as advocated by Senator Tolentino, the triple helix, now it's actually quinto helix of innovation. So the quinto helix of innovation involves government, academe, industry, community, and the environment. So when you put all of this together, you create an ecosystem that doesn't only include the educational sector, but the 4 other components need to be addressed in parallel to address this very complex problem that we have. Unfortunately, we created ourselves. So, but the best part is we can also disentangle some of those issues. And I'm very, despite of all of the challenges that the scientist sector is actually happening in the Philippines, I'm not giving up on whatever's happening right now. So the fact that we're having this discussion right now is something that will make it a little bit better when you wake up tomorrow morning. But my only hope and dream is that for the next generations of young scientists, let's just give them the environment that will inspire them to actually become better ones. And that's my personal opinion about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sura. Well said. Hopefully, we can have more conversations about the potentials for, since you mentioned Singapore, for health in the Philippines, given the demand for medical professionals. So how do we, how do you leverage that going forward? Thank you. Dr. Joel Coelho, Professor of Agricultural Biosystems Engineering, University of Arizona, is with us online. Dr. Coelho, can you hear us, sir?
Yes, I can.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Good afternoon. We can hear you loud and clear, sir. Please go ahead.
Yes. Good evening from Arizona, and thank you, Senator Angara, and to all the honorable senators and colleagues. And I thank you for this privilege. So I'm going to be quick. I'd like to make 3 points. And the first one is I'd like to make a statement that, as you all know, the Philippines now has about 140 million in terms of its population. And about roughly half of that, or 57 million, are actually young people aged between 0 and 24 years old. Now, they have the constitutionally guaranteed right to be educated. And the government has the obligation to honor that constitutionally guaranteed right. But the fact of the matter is, at this point in time, providing a globally competitive and world-class education to all of these 57 million young people is just beyond the financial resources of the government yet. And so there is a need for the Philippines to reach out and to welcome global investment in education. So yes, I am in favor of the proposed constitutional amendment pertaining to education reform. The Philippines exists and it thrives in a global village environment. And that has always been the history of the Philippines, from time immemorial, is that it's always been a globally interactive country, and that's how it's been thriving. And so it's important to take advantage of what's available out there to be able to meet again these sacred rights, almost really, to be fulfilled by the government for its young people. Now, there have been a lot of concerns that I heard during this meeting, and those are really valid concerns, pertaining to the ownership, the administration of these foreign-based schools. But, we're talking here about a constitutional provision, which is really the overarching law of the land. And for that to be implemented or to take advantage of that provision, it needs to be accompanied by, another set of laws and regulations. And I believe that really is a different forum. And that's where all of these concerns can be taken into account, and safeguards and guardrails can be put in place legally, so that, again, the interests of the Philippines in no way will be compromised. The last point I want to make is that opening to global investments for education in the Philippines really would help the Philippines and position it to have this steady pipeline of students who would major in science and technology, because the Philippines really needs to establish and to build its science and technology innovation ecosystem. And as Senator Angara referred to this earlier, the country should not be concerned just with educating young people, but also setting up this science and technology innovation ecosystem so that these educated young people, Filipinos, don't have to leave the country, but they can be gainfully and meaningfully employed within the country. So these two go hand in hand, and we at the National Academy of Science and Technology, Philippine American Academy of Science and Engineering, we're all working together with the appropriate government agencies. And in fact, we're working together to band them together so that there could be a cohesive partnership among them, so that this comprehensive science and technology innovation ecosystem could really be set up and built in the country, and that it could be made to thrive, so that all of these young people who are graduating from universities can be, again, gainfully employed locally in the Philippines. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Coelho, and good evening in Arizona. For the government agencies, now we have the DepEd, Attorney Castillo. Yes, thank you for waiting, sir. Thank you.
Makabata at magandang araw po. In behalf of DepEd po, we understand the significance of the resolution of both houses, number 6, and the value of the DepEd's inputs on this matter. This is why po I'm here, and I'm requesting the committee to extend extra time for us to finalize our position paper po.
I'm sorry you had to wait so long to say that.
It's okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Next, we have PRC, the Philippine Regulation Commission, Attorney RJ Rosales with Attorney Melissa Comafay. Oo nga, pasensya na po.
Mr. Chair and Your Honors, we have the lead resource person, but I just want to make a point. First, yung pong ating pinaka-source ng income ng Philippines is the services, and among them is our OFWs. So, and our challenge in PRC is that there is regarding international alignment. So, pag pumunta po sila ng ibang bansa, they need to study more. They need to, for example, yung graduate ng nurses natin in other countries, they need to study another 2 years. So that's the main problem. So, and another thing is in for example, in Germany, you have to study yung language proficiency. In Japan, the same thing. And then there are a lot of machineries that need to be learned. So by opening this educational institution here in the Philippines, that would be an advantage for us. They'll be bringing their technologies, their expertise. So this group of professionals would be able to advance their learning. So once they go there will no longer be barriers for being employed immediately. So we must yung ating pinakamalaking income ng source ng Philippines is the services, as I said. And among them is yung ating mga professionals. And that would be a best gift from them. If we will open up this educational institution here in the Philippines, and it will address this long period of time of addressing this problem. And another one is we say that as a lawyer, the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and all laws must bow to its mandate. So if you are making a legislation, and it must be aligned with the Constitution. So with that statement, I'll go to our lead resource person, Director Kumangkay.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Attorney RJ, as well as thank you for inviting the PRC to this public hearing today. Albeit that with that statement made by Attorney RJ, the PRC, of course, in this stance is not the direct regulator as we know it. However, there is a derivative impact on our agency, specifically, as mentioned earlier by one of our resource speakers, the licenses that our professionals take from PRC. But also, please be informed that the PRC, apart from, of course, the regulatory aspect of licensing and giving examinations, the PRC also looks at developing our professionals. And the PRC, through its my office, the International Affairs Office, we also collaborate together with our other agencies, such as the Department of Migrant Workers and other offices in charge in finding these pathways for our professionals once they are situated abroad. And it was good that it was mentioned also by one of our research speakers a while ago that from the not only are we looking from outbound but also from inbound, because the alignment also of our curricula together with the curricula of those abroad is also something that we look forward as a derivative impact of this endeavor that is proposed today. Together with that, we prepared an initial statement, but of course, this is not yet the official submission of the BRC, as we will be requesting that we later provide you a more what's this holistic statement. But initially, we would also like to recognize the intent of the frameworkers to optimize access to the best educational institutions to both Filipino and foreign children, as well as to ensure the best training to become globally competitive citizens in the modern world. Initially, the Commission fully supports the proposed amendments to the Constitution, taking on from the statutory construction of expressio unius as exclusio ulterius. We maintain that the express mention of one person, thing, or act of consequence excludes all other. And here, since we have specifically stated basic educational institutions will be covered, it excludes all the others, such as the tertiary education. With that application, we would like a clarification, of course, to what extent the law intends to, or this proposal intends to grant such liberalization. We heard from the other resource speakers that the 100% allowance is something that is looked forward to. But is this the intention of the senators who proposed such resolution? In the same manner, apart from delving into these issues, we would like to put out to the body that we will continue to address the effects of these liberalization from its standpoint that we have. And there is in liberalization of educational institutions, there is an expectation from foreign investors to put up tertiary and technical vocational schools, as mentioned earlier, and that will operate in alignment with the requirements of the foreign institutes. In effect, this will immensely diminish barriers of trade and services as being propounded, and will significantly aid the removal, if not the reduction, of what the Attorney RJ was mentioning, the bridging programs for Filipino professionals who are situated abroad. And furthermore, aside from the traditional educational institutions, specialized training centers, and even hospital facilities that cater to medical learners would potentially open up, thereby enabling the advancement of training for specialized skills and sharing of advanced technology in the target field of specialization, which actually PRC is endeavoring at the moment. And it must be noted that this is also in alignment with the goals of the Office of the President to increase the number of practicing healthcare workers in the Philippines while providing human resources for health requirements of other countries. And that encourages also the exchange, as was propounded by Attorney Virgil earlier. And so over the years, the Commission has mentioned, entered into various memorandum of understanding, memorandum of agreements, free trade agreements, as well as economic partnership agreements in relation to trade and services and recognition of professional services. However, one of the most propounded issues that we saw are the overlapping issues of education, culture, and mentioned language differences. And this continues to persist. And hopefully through this endeavor, this can also be addressed. And so one more thing that we did notice is that the proposed provision, albeit we propound to the body whether it was an intentional deletion of the paragraph regarding no educational institution shall be established exclusively for aliens, and no group of aliens shall comprise more than 1/3 of the enrollment in any school, etc. This one is somewhat contentious, as it will affect some of our processes at the moment. For example, in April 8 of 2015, wherein the Commission has entered into joint administrative order with the Department of Health on the conduct of medical residency and fellowship training program for foreign medical professionals here in the Philippines, that entails foreign residents of the medical profession who wish to study here in the Philippines. And in the said JAO, the deleted provision, we was used as a basis of determining the limit of FMPs allowed in any medical institution. So with this, if such is a proposal to remove the paragraph mentioned, this will be affecting some of our processes. In the same manner that, of course, we have to look into, as mentioned earlier, the Foreign Investment Act as well as the negative listing. So with that, they initially propound that the Commission finds no vehement objection to the proposed amendments. Rather, it gives its full support to the proposed amendment to liberalize educational institutions.
Thank you very much, Bernice Rosales and Comafe. We appreciate the work you put in there. Just that in response, I think the initial intention was to possibly open it up to 100% for tertiary and higher education. But I think, along the way, we're thinking one option is probably just to leave it unless otherwise provided by law, which is the case for professions, so the practice of profession. If there is a law which provides the country, then it can be allowed. So can we just give you a little bit of an assignment, because it will help us very much in our work, is to you mentioned the medical profession regulations. What are the specific regulations dealing with different professions? Like for teaching, for instance, for professors, what is the current restriction on them, or do they have to get a licensure exam? Are they still subjected to the labor code provision that there is no one qualified to teach that before they can teach that specific subject? Because that's what basketball coaches, for instance, have to undergo UP to when they hire a foreign basketball coach. They have shown that no one can do that job. So I'm wondering, for in the case of professors, what is the regulatory requirement for them?
Yes, so in general, no, for professionals, we adhere to the Constitution again, that the professions, Filipinos are, it is, the practice of the profession is limited to the Filipinos. However, subject to the provisions provided by law, and that allows the leeway for our professional regulatory laws to provide such conditions. And one of those conditions are the provision of reciprocity, at the same time the provision of what kind of practice they are intending to do here in the Philippines. And you mentioned specifically as to professors. And the PRC, of course, is limited to the regulated professions that we have in the Philippines. And right now we have 46 regulated professions. And if such professor is under the specific regulated profession, then that is when the PRC comes in. If it's, for example, professors in the universities, that would not fall under our professional teachers, for example, but that may fall under specific categories like a geography, geography, or all the other related professions. All the other regulated professions, including engineers, for example. So it depends, of course, on their. But in general, they would if it is within our scope, we would require them to have a special temporary permit before they can undergo the alien employment permit from the DOL, as you were mentioning, that they have to the requirement that it has to be proven that there are no other Filipinos that may practice apart from them. So those are the conditions, but of course it has to fall within the categories, as I mentioned. And the provision of taking the licensure exam as well is provided in some regulated professions. So not all professions allow.
How many regulated professions do we have now?
46 at the moment.
46. When you say regulated, there's a licensure exam. Is that what it means?
Exactly.
And
there's a professional regulatory board.
there's a board that sets further regulations on professional
together
practice.
with the commission.
Okay. Thank you. Senator Majority Leader.
Chairman, I was listening attentively to the statements made by our friends from PRC, and even Attorney RJ made mention about the importance of our service sector. I just recall the importance of the ASEAN Quality Assurance Framework. I'm sure you are all aware of this. And let me state for the record, the primary purpose of ASEAN Quality Assurance Framework is to enhance the quality of education in the ASEAN regions. And also, as you made mention, the importance also of supporting the mobility of whether you talk about students, workers, and professionals, both within and outside the region. Now, if in the ASEAN.org, the enhanced regional capacity in higher education as part of lifelong learning provision, including the harmonization of ASEAN higher education, moving the region into sharing the same academic standards. Ito yung pinupush nila. No? Now, there are ongoing initiatives among ASEAN countries to enhance the quality education in ASEAN region by developing a quality assurance framework in higher education where the ASEAN countries would be able or could benchmark and align their quality assurance systems. My question is how will these initiatives improve the quality of education in the country? And as you made your position, is amending Article 14 of the Constitution premature, considering that we have not seen the impact of these initiatives yet, unless we have already assessed and say kulang pa rin. And I think the best way to do it is to open up our education system. I would just like to hear from our friend Garcia. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Senator Villanueva, for that propounded questions. The PRC, I mentioned earlier, is also a part of the this initiative, in the move for our ASEAN qualifications reference framework under the Philippine Qualifications Framework Law. So together with our interagencies, that includes CHED as well as DepEd as well as TESDA and DOLE, we are part of this initiative, the Philippine Qualifications Framework, undertaking. And the same manner that we, as mentioned a while ago, the aspect of specializations, the PRC is looking towards developing these specializations to reflect it under the level of 6, 7, and 8 under the Philippine Qualifications Framework. And as you mentioned, as your question will go, if these initiatives improve the quality in the country, we would answer in the affirmative, because of course, as part of my statement earlier, the PRC is one in developing these professions, and by creating these kinds of specializations to cater, of course, towards this ASEAN qualifications reference framework, together with our Philippine qualifications framework, this is one endeavor that would allow us to, in a way, look towards how to improve our professionals and their endeavored professions. And whether your latter question is whether the amendment of this Article 14 would provide an, or is it too premature? I believe it can undergo parallel movements, because together with what we are doing in our specific jurisdictions, well, for the PRC, it would be the practice of the professions. That would mean after graduation and after licensure examinations, developing these professionals through their specializations. Together with that, it would, of course, as I mentioned earlier, it's more of an impact derivative for our agency, because that opening up these institutions would allow this practice, international practice alignment, as well as looking into international standardizations of these impacts, which would equate with what we are currently doing under the PQF.
Thank you for that. And I'm glad that you mentioned the Philippine Qualifications Framework, because the former CHED Commissioner is also here with us, former Secretary Tati Licuanan, former Commissioner of CHED, Cynthia Bautista, who also helped this representation craft actually the law itself, the Philippine Qualifications Framework. Now, if you look at the PQF report, let's talk about, for example, level descriptors. While the PQF has been accepted as aligned to ASEAN Qualifications Reference Framework, o yung AQRF criteria, there's still so much room for improvement. For example, let me point out what we discussed in EDCOM. I see our chairman here, Chairman Gatchalian. In a study of qualifications of, for example, warehousing and forklift operators, it was found that level 2 qualifications in the Philippines is only equivalent to level 1 in Thailand. Now, according to World Bank, you look at our descriptors, the PQF descriptors, they reported that our PQF descriptors do not progress uniformly across all levels. It noted that PQF levels do not fully reflect professional qualifications that require years of experience and practice and overlook hands-on experience and qualifications. Yan po yung nakalagay sa report na. So, my question now is, where are we? What is the status now of the review of our PQF level descriptors, as noted by the World Bank in its review of the PQF? I think it's important to note also the issues that have been identified in order to align or better align and reference our qualification frameworks with other countries. Otherwise, parang wala din po, no? Yeah, si Father Inocencio, please, sir.
This had been thoroughly discussed during the past Higher Education Summit in Cebu. And I think we have really missed the recommendation of the World Bank study on the implementation of this PQF. And so there was really the need to, again, even review the figure that represents our PQF. And it's so ladderized and one way of thinking, and it's always referred to higher education, a framework of higher education. So this has been called to consideration. And since we are very focused on workforce development based on Philippine qualification framework, we said the disparity of the movement of TESDA and CHED has to really to be articulated and integrated. And therefore, there was a suggestion, since there should be one mind in developing the workforce of development in the Philippines, why not merge TESDA and CHED in one department that is going to give a direction of both who will go to technical education or the academic professional field. So this was highly to be considered in this kind of reflection. So that's what was put at table during the summit. Because we see the non-alignment of the movement of TESDA and the non-alignment with CHED has caused this disparity of approach and the difficulty of really clarifying ourselves what are our qualification framework. And it need not be unilateral, but it can be, as Australian, circular movement in the development of the qualification. So this is a point to be really seriously studied.
Thank you, Father. What I'm getting from you, sir, is that I don't know if I would say there's room for improvement. There's so much room, huge room for improvement, and it starts when CHED and TESDA would meet.
Exactly.
Senator Angara, Senator Risa, and Senator Gatchalian would attest to this. The past or the last administration, I remember, every now and then we would call for TESDA, CHED, and DepEd to meet. In fact, the PQF NCC only met like once a year, if I'm not mistaken. So how do we expect the level descriptors the review of PQF level descriptors to improve. My only point, the only point I'm trying to emphasize here is that if there is so much room for improvement in aligning, in synchronizing the works of this trifocalized education, especially the CHED and TESDA, then perhaps when you talk about internationalization and our goal to make our workers globally competitive can be achieved just by being effective TESDA, having an effective TESDA and effective CHED. Would that be a correct statement, sir?
What we were recommending is that DepEd should have its own proper scope of responsibility. The proper scope of responsibility of DepEd is that they ensure that all those who have finished basic education should have foundation for tertiary education, be it TESDA or be it higher education. So once that is assured, I think we have basic material to work on both area. And therefore, the mastery of basic competencies of literacy, numeracy, critical thinking, and all of these ones should be really very much embedded in basic education and should not let go of students who are not having that kind of quality, both for tertiary and for TESDA, for TESDA and CHED. So I think that is the basic mandate of basic education. No student should have gone to a tertiary education without that preparation, because we will build only from that competency, whether it be technical or academic.
On that note, Father, and considering that we have Sec Tati here and Cynthia, wait, let's talk about mutual recognition agreements. There are about 8 currently. Philippines has 8 ASEAN mutual recognition agreements covering practitioners in nursing, dental, medical, accountancy, surveying, architectural, engineering, and tourism services. So this means that the qualifications of the practitioners in this field should have the same qualifications as that of their ASEAN counterparts. So this is another means to make our workers more competitive among their peers in the region. So with this particular initiative, again, I'm trying to understand, because as legislators, we are always ultra sensitive in opening up, amending or changing or revising our constitution. And if there are ways to do that without opening it up, then why are we going to do it? So perhaps my question is, are there positive gains from this mutual recognition agreements covering these fields? Yes, Ms. Cynthia?
So, Mr. Chair, I think the mutual recognition agreements are there, but they're not yet aligned with the ASEAN qualifications reference framework. So work is still being done there. But I guess with the Philippine qualifications framework, there was the referencing committee that referenced to AQRF has volunteered to also partly review it.
So wala pa rin pala tayo.
So things are being done, sir.
Yeah. Thank you. Sige po, Mr. Chair, I will.
Along the track of Senator Joel, Majority Leader, since I want to take advantage of our experts and maybe even the chairman on TechVoc, because that's the line of former Secretary, now Majority Leader Villanueva. Like for example, in TechVoc, there's a great dearth of cybersecurity professionals. So when I was approached, actually there was someone who wanted to talk to me about providing cybersecurity for the Senate. I said, why don't you talk to TESDA? and then you can put it in as a module across, because there's each corporation will need a cybersecurity professional, each government institution will need a cybersecurity. So they went and spoke to Tesla, and they got accredited. So my question is, how does that the issue of foreign ownership come into that? Because their partner was an Israeli. Because they, as everyone knows, the Israelis are some of the best at cybersecurity. So that's something I want to throw out to the body. Does the issue of foreign ownership come into play? Will on that's one example, no? But I assume across the board there are many industries where whether it's robotics or artificial intelligence, where foreign ownership becomes an issue. That's what I'm wondering. So maybe I think we need to across the table are educators, but maybe not enough industrialists. So maybe we'll have another session with entrepreneurs and industrialists. Yes, Father, please.
Yeah. Perhaps more than just speaking about ownership, what could be enhanced is how do we enhance partnership and collaborative work? And so therefore, this is the basis of how we are doing now our program with the different countries in terms of tech walk. So we have partner institutions abroad from China, from Korea, and we try to see and compare our competencies. Do they match? And when it is accepted by the receiving country that our competency match with their competency, so there is no problem. And what is very important to consider is our ecosystem do not facilitate that kind of agreement between those contracting parties, the employing and the training party. So the problem is the sectors in the ecosystem that prevents the kind of facility to be able to do that partnership. So how do we now go into that kind of network wherein all this ecosystem can provide the facility by which the kind of agreement between contracting party and the training party will be able to supply the workforce?
Dr. Serafika and then Dr. Concepcion afterwards. Yeah, please go ahead.
Thank you. I would just want to address it with an example that we're doing now. We have a US grant together with Unilab Foundation conducting advanced manufacturing competency. We actually just developed a curriculum architecture for our advanced manufacturing sector. We did a survey for about 500 companies last year, and we have 240 respondents. We actually visited Mayor Gatchalian in Valenzuela as well to look at the facility that you can offer. But most of the ongoing discussion are around advanced manufacturing, the 9 pillars of Industry 4.0, and we only have 15% of our companies in the Philippines right now practicing, and most of them are in cybersecurity. As you, they have ambition doing lean manufacturing as well as supply chain management. But the more advanced pillars like advanced robotics, augmented reality, even IoT are not yet being desired and administered. And when we talk to Tesla with DG Rose as well, doing STEM and Tibet, we have to align with our partners in MIT in Boston with their practice of the Massachusetts learnings that they had for bridging their workforce to become more adept with Industry 4.0. And clearly, the formation of a council is like, I think what you're addressing, Father, is what we're doing now. We formed the Advanced Manufacturing Skills Council together with MBC and Tesla as being part of it, and SAPI, our current chief of party, is Dan La Chica. And by forming the council, I describe the project as an industry-led, industry-demanded, and industry-adapted curriculum. There's no education sector yet. And on the second and the third year, that's when we transfer whatever's being utilized by industry to be adopted by the higher education and the vocational institutions. So it is like a piloting without...
That's a much needed missing link, sir.
Yeah, so that's another gap that we're trying to address in system right now as part of the curriculum development together with MIT in Boston. But again, the ownership didn't come into question. It's more of how do we roll it out and operationalize it. And then we deal with the regulatory agencies after. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Concepcion.
I'm glad you mentioned MIT because the tagline of MIT is mens et manus, mind and hands. So TESDA focuses on training, whether it's machinery, instruments, etc. And that's, I think, where we can demonstrate the triple helix of Senator Tolentino. The major investment is from the government. I'm trying to share with you the model in South Korea. So I visited a TESDA center there, and the government invests in the machinery that then is used to train the employees of thriving companies, not just startups. And the trainers are from the universities. So latest methods are shared by the university experts with the latest concepts and principles. So it's a very synergistic relationship, and it's viable because the industry employees are paying for their training. So that's the South Korean model. It's called CHAMP. It's a major investment by the government. And so sometime back, I asked Senator Cynthia Villar, why not place TESDA under the DOST? Because DOST has the RDIs, it has the facilities for training, and I'm particularly interested in manufacturing and industrial manufacturing, because we need to develop our metal industries. For example, steel manufacturing and fabrication. Okay, of course, yung mga AI, yung mga virtual robotics and automation comes hand in hand with that. But the basics should be provided by the government, and we have models for TechVoc. We have Bosco, we have Mapua University, so you could get experts from them, and of course we have our UP engineering faculty. So sana magtulungan ang academe, government, set up the facilities, invest in it, and see what we can do to help our MSMEs in the food and agriculture business industries. Ayan, pwede yung UP Los Baños facilities natin kung minsan underutilized, no? So there's another model, I think, in Taiwan, and President Xi here has seen the eco-industrial parks that's focused on steel and steel fabrication. We have a proposal for them to set up the pilot training facility in our future TESA SNT Park in UP Diliman. So that's one of our proposals with our NCPAG leaders, for them to set it up and to have UP faculty train together with our friends from Taiwan.
Thank you, Dr. Concepcion. We still have to hear from the Commission on
Can I
Highway.
just make a very, very
Yes,
short
please,
statement, Mr. Chair? I think it's really important what we are hearing here today. It's gotta be industry-led. And I remember when we were in TESDA, and please don't ask me to go back to TESDA, Mr. Chan, because you always say that. It's got to be industry-led. Otherwise, the training regulations, the curriculums will not matter if it's no longer required by the industry. We also, just to report, we also passed, and the four of us here are authors of Tulong Trabaho Law. And it's supposed to do what Ma'am Giselle is talking about. We need to involve the industry. We need to involve the big players to find out what they really need, and we have to accustom, and if we need to custom fit the curriculum, the training regulation. We have to do it, because that's the only way for me. I just want to put that on record, Mr. Chair. Thank you
very much. Yes, I agree. Attorney Carpio, Peter Lloyd Carpio from CHED. It's our last resource person.
Honorable Mr. Chair, and thank you for this opportunity. The comments of our esteemed persons and our legislators are quite well are well taken. So we'll submit the same to our commission and bank, so that we could submit our written comments, Mr. Chair. That is all.
Thank you very much, Attorney. Yes. Were there raised hands aside from the giggles on this side? Chair Liguana.
I was just going to say, before we decide the fate of TESDA, I wanted to go back to the topic of this hearing and just
Like football, because it was with Dole, it was kicked to DTI, and now we want to kick it to DOST. So
yeah, exactly.
yeah, Dole original.
But you know, Mr. Chair, listening through to all of the inputs and the wonderful examples that were given, just points to, in my view, partnerships, transfer of technology, sharing technology, but nowhere does it prove to me that ownership is necessary. So that is what I'm still looking for. I agree with all of these wonderful innovations, but do we have to own it?
Well, perhaps then we have to again look at our question and premise. Maybe it's better just in legislation, and then we leave it as is for now, with the colatilia that future generations, at least at the very least, we made it easier for them to pivot or to adjust, di ba? We made them more nimble in that sense, because this is the first time since 1987 that we've been discussing the economic amendments in earnest or in detail, So it took us this long because the charter debate was poisoned by political and personal ambition. That's the reality. So even now we're laboring under that bias because that's a historical bias. But let's just plow through, di ba? Let's just plow through and talk about the merits and what needs to be done. Let's put away all the noise and try to find make some sense about all this. Yes, President Gigi.
Yes, before I think it's about to conclude, but before that, the presentation of Dr. Concepcion, I can assure you, many of it will be, aspects of it will be included in our next cycle, the UP budget. They're all working we are working with our scientist, Dr. Sirapi.
I anticipated that with my comments earlier that she make it scalable.
Yes, we are making it scalable. We are very, very conscious of the need for industry, academia, and government to really work together. As a matter of fact, that is the triple helix. It's not actually new. I mean, Japan is doing the same thing when it comes to producing their own COVID. As a matter of fact, Moderna is a product of academia, industry, and government. And the director of Moderna is a graduate of the College of Medicine. Yes, he's very happy to say that. He's volunteering his services for UP as well, because we are saying that our connection with industry will be global connection. And definitely, I have already asked through, of course, representatives and even Secretary Pascual, former president, and Secretary Balisacan, that UP is interested in hosting all those innovation hubs because we have, I think, a sufficient critical mass of scientists and space, and we are very serious about bringing the work of some of our laboratories into the market.
What are you planning to do with the land holdings in Laguna? Is it Laguna and Quezon? You have
Yes,
hundreds
we
of
have
hectares
Laguna
there.
and we have the Quezon Laguna land grant. My instructions is to fully utilize these land grants, and we are entering into public-private partnership discussions right now. But basically, it is used for, among other things, climate change adaptation.
Should put up a scientific eco zone there.
We are
to collaborate with industry, a kind of a microcosm of what
Yes.
Dr. Concepcion is proposing.
Yes, we are planning some. As a matter of fact, we're thinking of a science city, but focused on developing agriculture towards food self-sufficiency, and also biodiversity.
Perfect, because of the
Yes.
the terrain. It rains a lot there, so you could.
Yes, and we are also inviting non-renewables per power because of the University of the Philippines we want to be the number one SDG university in the world. I mean, we want second per second.
Right.
So, thanks to the Senate for giving us initial budget for the SDG Center.
Well, we'll try to give you more for, but these are the things we were excited about, President. Yeah.
But the thing about, yes, it's very, I mean, sometimes embarrassing to think that our peers in ASEAN may not actually be our peers because we have only about 35%, around 35% PhD, and neighbors like Thailand would have 70. and approaching 100. And the problem with the university is that we produce such great professors, they are being poached. And so the focus now, I do not want to be known as the infrastructure president. I want to be known as the subcomponent faculty development president. We really need to invest in our human resources. And that's what we do. The other thing, Mr. Chair, is that we know that we want to produce as many research and scientists. 35,000 is quite a tall order per million based on our population, but we're willing to kakasakpo kami doon. Except that hindi po
Where are we
kaya
now?
ng
I'm
UP.
curiously. If our goal is 35,000, where are we?
Layo eh. Ang layo eh.
8,000.
No,
28,000?
Per million?
20,000 overall because it's 173 per million population.
Per million na pinag-usapan.
Yeah. So
And then
where are we now? This 35,000 per million.
150, 170 lang yata, Mr. Chairman eh.
Malayo.
Per million ha, hindi
Yes,
yung
yes,
absolute
per
numbers.
Okay.
But one of the initiatives, I have expressed this vision already. We want to be not just a research hub for the country, but the research hub of hubs for the country. We want to be not just a university, but the university of universities in the country. What I'm saying is we don't even want to compete anymore with undergraduate education. I'm going to say something very controversial. I do not see the role of UP as to top the bar, to pot the board, although that's part of it. If I had my way, Mr. Chairman, I would only admit undergrad who are honors track, PhD track, because our job is to produce more PhDs for other schools. It is well proven that the more PhD, the good undergrad requires PhDs. And to produce this, say, 1,000 that we plan per million, UP cannot do that alone. So that means really we are trying to encourage more candidates from other schools to take up graduate studies in UP. The key is a very good postdoctoral program abroad for selected technical or selected areas or discipline that we feel are important or strategically important for the country. As I said in the opening statement, we have 470 partnerships abroad, and we are going to open it up to our friends, first SUCs, LUCs, and of course the private sector, because our mandate is not for ourselves. It is to lead in higher education. And definitely the program as expressed by former Vice President for Academic Affairs, Gisela Concepcion, and of course, with apologies to Ateneo, I know you said this is UP heavily represented here. We are, yes, that's true, but our mentality is that we are the national university, and we carry the burden of the entire Philippine education in our burden, on our shoulders, in our minds at least. So we are sharing this university. Hindi po namin kaya lahat yon. And definitely, as a matter of fact, there are certain programs in other schools that are even more advanced than UP. And we say this not with any kind of condescension. They are very good at that. We feel that we should really be there. But the vision is a university of universities. We want to be specifically a research university. And anyone familiar with changing university knows how dangerous that is, to plow through set attitudes. But it is a challenge that at least this administration is willing to face. Mr. Chairman.
Yes, I just advise you to select your audience when you say that, President Gigil, because as Chairman Tati warned, when you say research, nakakain ba yung research? Those are actual quotes from policymakers, kaya ingat lang po. But it's a worthy ambition.
Kinakain po namin ang research.
And we'll support you. Nakakapakain. Dapat yung sagot doon, hindi lang nakakain, nakakapakain pa ang research. Actually, yun ang magandang sagot doon. If there are no other from the body, I think we'll open it up to our colleagues, Senator Risa, then Senator Win. Yeah.
Salamat, Mr. Chair. At maraming salamat kay President Jimenez for really quite a scintillating input. I think it's rare na we witness the state university thinking aloud about itself, how to evolve. Even speaking as an Atenean. And before I go to my questions, Mr. Chair, para po sa CHED at para sa ating mga associations of educational institutions, just two quick points for the record. First, Mr. Chair, I wish to manifest that the present formulation of RBH 6 on education allows the liberalization even of basic education. As written, the word basic is inserted at the beginning of the provision, but the last sentence states, the control and administration of educational institutions shall be vested in citizens of the Philippines unless otherwise provided by law. So in this last sentence, which is controlling, there's no qualifier for education. Therefore, it is possible, at ito po yung sinasabi ko kaninang prejudicial question or point, it is possible for Congress to interpret that all of education is open to contrary legislation. And next and last for my two quick opening points, Mr. Chair, I wish to remind our committee of the statements of former Chief Justice Davide at the beginning of these hearings. Quote, with foreign control or dominance in our basic education, we would put asunder the noble, patriotic, and nationalistic virtues which are constitutionally mandated to be a part of the curricula of all educational institutions. These include teaching patriotism and nationalism, love of humanity, respect for human rights, appreciation for the roles of national heroes in the historical development of the country, the rights and duties of citizenship, and strengthening ethical, moral, and spiritual values. In the deliberations of the Constitutional Commission, Commissioner Gascon also explained that, quote, the intent when we speak of educational institutions being wholly owned by Filipinos is that in the rearing of Filipino citizens, Filipino values are encouraged. We have to safeguard the interests of our future generations by assuring that education be directed to serve Filipino interests, close quote. So to my questions now, Mr. Chair, to the Commission on Higher Education, both current and former. So aside from Attorney Carpio, to please, as you wish to include Dr. Tati and Dr. Sinch. Gaya po ng ibang bansa sa ASEAN, and we've had really great examples of them in this hearing, di po ba may programa ang CHED na tumutulong upang ang training at certified na qualifications ng ating mga graduates ay katumbas ng mga hinahanap sa ibang bansa? At syempre, maaari namang imbitahin at papasukin ang mga mahusay na guro upang palakasin ang ating mga course offerings. So, ano nga po ba ang kailangang gawin pa? Kailangan bang alisin ang limitasyon sa saligang batas dahil may dayuhang universidad ang gustong magtayo ng branch sa Pilipinas na 100% owned nila? Would Attorney Carpio like to address this, or would the former commissioners like to address this? I see, Mr. Chair, I see Commissioner Tati looking meaningfully at Commissioner Sinch.
Yeah,
Would you like
anyone,
to take the question?
anyone can answer. Yeah, maybe CHED is the proper. Would you like to answer that?
Attorney Carpio.
Insofar as that is concerned, Mr. Chair, we still haven't discussed the, so I'm not at liberty to ventilate the points of CHED on this matter.
Answer na lang,
yes, we will,
attorney.
Yeah.
We realize that maybe you want to think about it more, but and not come up with a knee-jerk response. But please, for benefit and
we do, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would
So I think we are really thinking very